the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. You're with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. Coming up, well, it's finally here. Whinge and Ginger's new book is out. The artist formerly known as Prince Harry has got his book on the shelves now. There we go. We were expecting queues round the block, Black Friday-style scenes, people fighting each other, pushing their own nan into the street to get to the book. But instead, there were just a few people milling around a Waterstones. But there we go. I will be speaking to a man who queued up overnight, some would call it camping out, so he could be one of the first people in the UK to get his hands on the book. I'm going to be talking live and exclusive to him very shortly. Also this hour, strikes could well be a thing of the past. New laws are coming in to block the never-ending cycle of strike action by requiring minimal service levels. So, the big question here, I'm going to ask you this, is whether or not some people lose their right to strike based on what job they do. So, a nurse on a cancer ward, etc., etc. You get the gist. Today, ladies and gentlemen, Boris is back. That's right, the former Prime Minister will make a keynote speech later where a portrait of him, naturally, will be unveiled. I get loads of emails every single day from you wonderful people saying that you still love Boris. In recent times, though, it started to get to, actually, that ship has sailed, let it go, let it go. Anyway, if you want to bring Boris back, I want to know why. Tell me why you think that. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Yes, get in touch, keep those emails coming in. I want to know two things from you today. What you would say to Prince Harry if you walk past him in the street, and if you want Boris back, why? OK, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now it's your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB Newsroom. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch has called the government's new anti-strike bill an attack on human rights. The legislation, which will go through Parliament today, will require some union members to work during strikes to ensure a minimum level of public service. It comes amid a wave of industrial action across the public sector in a dispute over pay. Business Secretary Grant Shapps says the legislation is necessary to protect the public.
To deny and to vote against legislation that brings in minimum safety levels to help our constituents is to attack their security and their welfare.
Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner says the system was failing before the strikes began.
Is my constituent Spina, who waited over an hour for an ambulance, who died waiting for an ambulance, and that was not on a strike day. That is because of the disastrous chaos we have in the system under this Conservative government.
Meanwhile, teachers in schools across Scotland are on the first day of their two-day strike after failing to reach an agreement over pay with the Scottish Government. The current offer would see most staff in classrooms receive a 5% pay rise, but unions are demanding a 10% increase. Primary school teachers have walked out today, while staff at secondary schools will walk out tomorrow. Labour has promised a package of welfare reforms under their leadership to help people return to work. Under the plan, the claimants will try paid work, and if it doesn't work out within a year, they can go back to the benefits they were on previously. The Labour Party also plans a further reform of employment support for the over 50s. Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth claims the reforms will help disabled people and those on sickness benefits.
What I'm proposing today are new measures, new reforms, new thinking to support people who say they want to return to work. Now, in this country, we've got 1 million people looking for work who want a job, and we've got hundreds of thousands of people who are currently designated as long-term sick, but say they would want to work if given the right support.
The UK's first ever space launch has ended in failure after engineers say it suffered an anomaly. The Virgin Orbit jet took off from Cornwall late last night, carrying a rocket with 9 small satellites over the Atlantic Ocean. However, the American company says the rocket failed to enter the orbit after it was released. There'll be an investigation into exactly what happened over the coming days. Amazon says it plans to shut down 3 UK warehouses, which could impact more than 1,000 jobs. The company launched consultations at sites in Hemel Hempstead, Doncaster and Gourock. It's understood workers will be offered roles at other Amazon locations. The company's also revealed plans for 2 major centres in the West Midlands and in the North East, which will create 2,500 jobs over the next 3 years. Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, has finally hit bookshelves, but his version of some events has been thrown into doubt. In the book, the Duke of Sussex writes that he heard about the death of his great-grandmother, the Queen Mother, in a phone call whilst at Eton. She died in March 2002. But GBNews has uncovered photographic evidence which shows the Prince returning from a skiing trip to Switzerland with his father and brother at the time. Representatives of the Duke have been contacted for comment. A teacher in the US has been hailed a hero after evacuating pupils from a classroom after being shot by a 6-year-old boy. 25-year-old Abigail Sverner was shot by one of her pupils at Rich Neck Elementary School in Virginia last Friday. Police say the boy fired one shot, which hit her hand and chest, but the teacher still managed to escort her students to safety. She's currently in hospital in a stable condition. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, it's back to Patrick.
Right, welcome back, everybody. Let's crack on, shall we? Now, were you expecting scenes of mayhem this morning as shoppers flooded through the doors of bookshops to fight over that last copy of Prince Harry's memoir as it was officially released here in the UK? Of course, the people of Spain have been able to get their grubby little paws on it for however long, but no, now it's the British people's turn. Some bookshops even opened at midnight as the controversial book hit the shelves, but no, it was a rather subdued affair as queues were sparse. Just one person was waiting outside Waterstones. I only said Wetherspoons, and I bet there were more people waiting outside Wetherspoons. Anyway, flagship branch in Piccadilly in central London when it opened at 8 a.m. 8 a.m, there will definitely have been more people waiting outside Wetherspoons. Anyway, it could be down to knowing almost every revelation and claim through leaks, or it could be that no one cares. A lot of you say that you don't care. You do. The inbox is already popping off. I was asking you what you would say to Harry if you walked past him in the street, and I want your emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Kathy's been on. I would tell him to... Oh, no. Sorry. Can't read that out. Anyway, but wait. Hold the book press, because within the last hour, Prince Harry's ability to accurately recall events has been thrown into serious doubt by our very own... It's the one and only, it's the wonderful royal reporter, Cameron Walker. And Cameron, you've found some rather interesting info in this, haven't you?
Yes, Patrick, good afternoon. There seems to be an inconsistency with Prince Harry's version of events following the death of his great-grandmother, the Queen Mother, back in March 2002. So I'm just going to read out a passage of what Harry says in his new memoir. He says, "At Eton, while studying, I took the call. I wish I could remember whose voice it was at the other end, a courtier's, I believe. I recall that it was just before Easter, the weather bright and warm, light slanting through my window, filled with vivid colours." And then the phone call read, "Your Royal Highness, the Queen Mother has died." Right. Now, from news reports...
Book, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much.
Perfect voice for it.
Thank you. I'll allow Prince Harry to do his own audiobook. Yes. But from all the news reports at the time suggest that Prince William, Prince Harry, and the then Prince Charles were actually on a ski holiday in Switzerland. Now, the Queen Mother died on the 30th of March 2002, which was Easter Saturday, so presumably schools were closed for the Easter holidays. I've spoken to a former royal correspondent who was covering that ski trip and was doing the photo call with William, Harry and Charles. They do the photo call. It's a pre-arranged photo call, so it's on the understanding that once that's over, the journalists all fly back to the UK to leave the family alone to have a private ski holiday. So that is what has happened. When this royal correspondent landed back in the UK, that's when they got the phone call saying that the Queen Mother was gravely ill, which suggests again that they were skiing, they were on holiday skiing.
Well, it definitely doesn't sound like he was at Eton. That's for sure.
Who knows? We don't know. I'm just pointing out the inconsistencies.
It would be an amazing journey to manage to get from skiing to Eton.
And GB News has also uncovered what appears to show photographic evidence of Prince William, Harry and Charles arriving back into the United Kingdom.
So there we go. So that is, of course, Prince Charles, Prince William, and Prince Harry, and that is, as we understand it, returning from...
Yeah, so this is them arriving back in the United Kingdom from their skiing holiday in Switzerland following the death of the Queen Mother. This photograph was taken on March the 31st, 2002. Now, there is absolutely no suggestion here that Prince Harry deliberately told any mistruths. The royal correspondent who I spoke to pointed out to me that it could well very much be an honest mistake, a lapse of memory, perhaps.
Yes.
But the problem here is it raises the question if there's an inconsistency on this, let's be frank, quite pedantic point of where he was when he found out where the Queen Mother died.
Why put it in if you're not sure, It's bizarre.
It raises questions and concerns about are there any other inconsistencies in this book? And many are also making the arguments that the death of your great-grandmother is a pretty big life event which you would perhaps have more memory of. Now, Prince Harry does write in here that he struggled and have at school with lapses of memory due to this trauma that he faced following his mother's death. But unfortunately, it's in black and white. There is a big inconsistency here.
An inconsistency, and as you've rightly said there, doesn't it indicate that perhaps, just perhaps, there could be inconsistencies in other areas as well? Cameron, thank you very much, and well done. We'll ferret it around to find that. I'm sure there'll be more as you work your way through even more. How far through the book have you actually got?
Well, cover to cover, 100 pages, but I've also had to do skim reading and reading the summaries, so I will get there.
You'll get there. You will get there. Brilliant stuff. Cameron Walker, thank you very, very much. Our royal reporter will now go back to doing some reading, I imagine. Anyway, right, let's speak to our national reporter, Ellie Costello, who is outside one of the biggest bookshops in London. Yes, Ellie, I haven't seen you since our Christmas stint together. I hope you're keeping well. What's going on then? I can just see Prince Harry's face looming.
I know we've seen a lot of that in the past week, haven't we, Patrick? But it's fair to say there wasn't quite a stampede for Spare outside Waterstones in Piccadilly today. As you say, one of the biggest bookshops in the country, but there was, in fact, only one customer in the queue when this shop opened at 8 o'clock this morning, but there must have been 40 or 50 journalists gathered around her. Her name was Caroline Lennon, and I asked her how she felt about being the only person in the queue.
Didn't expect me to be on my own. I thought there'd be a long queue. I'm quite surprised, to be honest with you. I thought there'd be a lot more people. I'm saddened about that, to be honest.
And what made you want to buy the books? There's been so many leaks, hasn't there? There's been so much in the press.
I don't know. I just want to read about him. I've not turned up here to be the first in the queue to be, hey, I've done it. No, I was hoping there'd be a lot more people to share my you know, comments with, and there's no one to talk to.
And what's your first impression of the book?
Well, I like the picture, to be honest. I thought the picture's quite nice. It's well done. And I've heard the interviews. I can't wait for the audio book. I've bought that already. And I can't wait to read about his family.
That is absolute gold, Ellie. Fantastic. And have they sold out now then? Is it all gone, all the copies in there where you are?
No, still plenty of copies to be had here at Waterstones in Piccadilly, Patrick. Certainly doesn't seem as though there's been a lot of footfall at this shop today, but there could be plenty of reasons for that, to be fair. The weather hasn't been great. It was lashing down with rain this morning. You would have had to have been a certain type of person to get up in the dark, the wind and the rain and head down to the bookshop. The second thing is the way that we've buying books has changed, hasn't it? Lots of people now pre-order on sites like Amazon, and Amazon have said that this has been in their pre-ordered best-selling list this week, and Waterstones themselves have said that this is the best-selling pre-order that they've had in a decade. So it has certainly been selling online, if not physically in person. And the third thing, Patrick, is the leaking. Of course, this was published in Spain last week. We're not quite sure whether that was a security blip or whether that was just fantastic PR, but people feel like they have already read the book. And I just spoke to a woman here who came up and chatted to me and said, I just don't think people are buying it because we've already read it in the newspapers. But it does seem, at least from this store, this is the only book in the window. If you're listening on the radio, the only thing you can see is the face of Prince Harry. It's the only book that they've decided to put on display. And there it is, Patrick, the memoir that everybody is talking about. That's what they put on their poster here, talking about for good or for bad, but it is going to continue to dominate the headlines, that's for sure.
Ellie, thank you very, very much. Our national reporter there, Ellie Costello, who's outside a Waterstones. Well, you can still get copies. I mean, I tell you what, it was a real shame, wasn't it, that people like me decided to relentlessly pump out every single little snippet that we could possibly find from the book. Almost makes it feel like you've read it, doesn't it? Almost makes it feel like you don't need to go out there and line his pockets by buying it. Anyway, somebody who didn't drink the particular Kool-Aid on this one and decided no one's getting in the way of him and Prince Harry's latest offering. It was Professor Chris Imafidden, who was the first in line, who was the first in line outside a WH Smith's in Victoria Station. I love doing these kind of news stories. This is the great one. The man who was the first in line outside a WH Smith's in Victoria Station to buy Harry's book at midnight. Good stuff. How are you, first and foremost?
Very, very sad. Have sat down, speed read the entire book. This is not the Harry I know.
Oh.
It was really ghost written by a ghost. It wasn't written by him.
Oh, bless you. OK, I wasn't expecting this. I thought you'd be a massive fan of him.
Look at what I wrote on my title. I say, you are not a spare, Harry. We love you.
Oh, OK. And so you obviously do have a lot of love for Harry, and having read what you've read now, has that changed? It seems that you seem to think that maybe he's a bit different.
This is not the content of the young man I knew. He was very inspirational when he came to inner city Birmingham and spoke to students and said they can make it. He has a story of overcoming difficulties, overcoming uncertainties. That was who I knew. The person that I saw at Grenfell trying to inspire people that have been through the fire is not who wrote this. It must have been written by a ghost, really a ghost. Really? There is no contents page, by the way. I went through it, no contents page.
No.
I read it. Do you know how much is given to charity? That is the Harry I know. He gives and he gives and he gives. He needs to know that we love him unconditionally. No matter what he does, we still love him. We loved him as a young man in Eton that turned his life around. We loved him as a young man that went to Africa, saw the poor, and felt for the poor. We love him as Diana's son. He must return back to the Diana's son that we knew. The young man that went to war, humbled himself, connected with the country.
Well, exactly.
He laid down his life for his country. So this book must be written by a ghost.
So has he damaged his reputation, in your opinion? Do you think it's damaged his reputation?
if you write a book like this, it's either you were really, really annoyed. You know, sometimes I tell my colleagues, say, don't send that email. You are very annoyed.
Yes.
You are raging with anger. Please don't send that email. Wait another day, reread the email, correct it, and then send it. That's what I would have done if I was his editor. Say, please don't hit send. The one you sent to me, thank you for sending it.
Yeah. But he sent it like, look, we've all been there. I mean, I've sent emails that I strongly regret as well, so I can get exactly what you mean. But the problem is Harry he's had months, hasn't he, to figure this out. He even went back for the Platinum Jubilee. You know, there's been the Queen's funeral as well. You would have thought that he would have had enough time to come to his senses. Look, very quickly, very finally on this one, what was it like for you queuing? What time did you queue last night and into the early hours of this morning?
I stumbled there at about 9:30, and they said, oh, don't worry, if you grab your coffee here, we'll be open at exactly midnight. So I got my coffee, went through newspapers because I love reading. I'm a speed reader. I can do up to 1,000 words a minute. So I was just reading when the time passed, and they asked us, oh, now the shop is now open for us to buy the book. So I was excited. I went in there because I've read different versions of the book. When I saw the American interview and the content is spewed out, it was different from the ITV interview and the content again. So there were many versions. I said, okay, which of the version of Harry that I know will I believe?
Well, but you shouldn't have to ask this about people, Chris. This is the thing. Look, obviously we've only met for the first time here. Now you seem like a pretty straight guy. You seem like a pretty normal guy. I don't reckon that people go, oh, which version of Chris am I going to get today? Which version do I believe or whatever? But look, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show, and hopefully I'll chat to you soon. It was fantastic to talk to you, and well done for
So my word for in the street is we love you, and we'll love you, no matter what you do.
Oh, thank you very much. I might get that clipped and then play it back to myself, actually. Chris, thank you very much. Chris Iverfin in there, Professor and Chairman of Excellence in Education Charity. Good man. Right. OK, we're moving on from Harry. I know you can stop throwing things at your television screen now. Earlier today, the government outlined a new bill which aims to maintain minimum service levels in the public sector during walkouts. If passed, it will force some trade union members to continue working on strike days. Now, at a cabinet meeting earlier, the business secretary explained how he plans to balance the ability to strike with the need to protect the public. It's called public services, after all, isn't it? It's a move that's angered trade unions, of course. The RMT General Secretary, Mick Lynch, is calling it an attack on human rights and civil liberties, which the union plans to oppose in the courts. So basically threatening to go to court, Parliament and indeed the workplace. I am now joined by trade unionist Jerry Hicks and political commentator David Oldroyd-Bolt. Both of you, thank you very much. Great to have you on. Right, Jerry, you are, of course, a trade unionist. The idea of you being made to work even if your members do vote to strike, good for the public, bad for you?
Well, I think it's bad for everyone, frankly. It's not about protecting the public or minimum safety levels. Nurses, paramedics, firefighters, they do that now anyway. It's and they are members of the public, just like university workers, postal workers. They're members of the public. What this is about, it's about anti-union legislation. It's about anti-people legislation. There's a pattern here. When the Tories run out of argument, they demonise and criminalise, whether that's Extinction Rebellion or whether it's scapegoating asylum seekers and refugees.
Just on that, Jerry,
and now they're demonising workers and criminalising workers.
OK, I do get that, right? I do get that, Jerry, but at the same time as well, I would expect that the government would say, well, hang on a minute, if train strikes alone are costing our hospitality sector £1.5 billion a month, what Extinction Rebellion was costing them, should it not maybe have a duty to clamp down on that? I'll come back to you, Jerry. I'm going to go to political commentator David Oldroyd-Bolt right now. David, your views when it comes to this particular anti-strike legislation. Is it against human rights?
No, of course it's not against human rights. The key point here is that these are public servants. They are not people employed in the private sector where they've struck a bargain with their employers, which the employer is now reneging on. These are people who choose to go into the public sector because of the extremely good benefits package they get, not only including their salaries, but their pensions and the amount of time off they get. They are holding the country to ransom at a time when the country cannot afford it. Not that the country should ever be held to ransom, but at this time in particular, when families have struggled over Christmas to see their other family members because the railways have been on strike, and when you have these overmighty barons of the trade unions, people like Mick Lynch, essentially saying that we are not going to work. We are going to hold you to ransom until you give us what we want. This is extortion. Okay. And there is no way that public servants should be allowed to do this. If they want these sorts of rights, they should leave the public service and go and work in the private sector where they are free to strike a bargain that they either see as good or ill.
OK, Jerry, come back to that for me, please.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you what's extortion. That's the energy bills, it's the soaring inflation, it's high taxation, it's wage stagnation. I'd like minimum safety standards. I didn't interrupt your colleague. I'd like minimum safety standards in our NHS on non-striking days. You wait hours for an ambulance. You wait in the ambulance for hours. You wait in a corridor for hours for a doctor. But they're not going to legislate for that. In fact, they'll rip up their targets in the NHS. This government has form on this. They demonise and criminalise when they're in trouble, and they're in trouble on all fronts. So they seek to take our minds off the real issues. This present government is Bolsonaro and Trump rolled into one. Suella Braverman's dream was to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda, not to fix the NHS. Not to eradicate.
Well, that's not her job, though, Jerry, to be fair, isn't it? I mean, you know, that's not her job. She's the Home Secretary, she's not the Health Secretary. I do take your point. I think a lot of people might have been with you
for this anti-union legislation.
OK, sorry, I couldn't hear what you said there, but yes, something about anti-union legislation. David, I'll go back to you, Jerry, don't worry. David, go on, I could see you. You were getting angry then.
Well, I'm not angry. I'm just bemused how these people in the unions think that we're going to do anything about the state of public finances when they insist on higher and higher and higher wages and benefits at a time when the country can't afford it. Now, let's not even start talking about NHS funding, because that's a whole different kettle of fish, and that is, as we know, to mix metaphors, the elephant in the room of UK public finances. But the point remains that these people have chosen to work in an extremely well-financed public sector. They have chosen to do this because of the benefits that accrue to it and because of the extremely flexible working practices which many of your viewers in private industry do not have. Your viewers and the members of this country who are paying for this public service do not deserve to be held to ransom by these public servants. And it's as simple as that.
OK, Jerry, I suppose if the conditions are that bad and things are so awful, why don't people just get another job?
Well, you know, people are leaving in their droves. They're leaving the health service in their droves. To me, we may as well have a phrase mega now, make England great again. You know, we're talking nonsense here. In the public sector, year on year of 13 years of Tory government, there's been wage cuts below inflation, wage rises, or even no rises at all. It doesn't surprise me after all this time. People have had enough.
I get that, Jerry. I get that. I do. Yeah, look, I absolutely understand what you're saying. I have the words echoing in my ear of people who had children on cancer ward beds, for example, when nurses were striking, or people whose elderly relatives couldn't get health care when they were lying at the bottom of the stairs, and it is making, or people who couldn't go and see dying loved ones, had to get the train to go and see them over the Christmas period, etc. And I do have their words ringing in my ears, thinking, I reckon they probably do want minimum service levels. I'll throw it back to you for the final word, David, on certainly when it comes to pay rises, etc. Has there been a real pay cut and all of this stuff?
Everybody in the country has taken a real terms pay cut because of inflation and because of the austerity that was necessary at the beginning of the 13 years of the Tory government. But the point is that the private sector, which pays the bills for the public sector, has suffered much worse. People in the private sector are really suffering, and they are being made to suffer even more by these overmighty trade unionists.
All right, look, both of you, I think we could all agree we could carry this on for a lot longer, but we're going to have to make a move, chaps, I'm afraid. Look, thank you very much. Great to have you both on the show. Good to have a range of views. That is trade unionist Jerry Hickser, political commentator David Oldroyd-Bolt, just reacting to whether or not, essentially, it's against human rights or whether it's completely justified to have these tighter strike laws, minimum service requirements, which basically, I think, frankly, puts the name public servant to exactly what it should be, shouldn't it? This is really why the government wants to do it. I can get that people in unions think it's a bit fruity, but at the end of the day, if people are public servants, then maybe the government has a duty to make sure they can serve the public. Right, Patrick Christys on GB News. Coming up, could Boris Johnson be on the verge of a leadership comeback? That's right, you heard, no, this isn't a headline from a couple of months ago, no, this isn't a headline from a few months before that. This is a completely different headline about Boris Johnson doing the same thing. The former Prime Minister will make a keynote speech later where a portrait of himself will be unveiled. I really hope it's like the Cristiano Ronaldo statue and it just looks like a horse. Anyway, would you welcome his return? I want to know. If you want Boris back, email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Why? Why do you want the big guy back? Back in a tick.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello, good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. I'm Tamsin Roberts. It's 3:31. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch has called the government's new anti-strike bill an attack on human rights. The legislation, which will go through Parliament today, will require some union members to work during strikes to ensure a minimum level of public service. It comes amid a wave of industrial action across the public sector in a dispute over pay. Business Secretary Grant Shapps says the legislation is necessary to protect the public.
To deny and to vote against legislation that brings in minimum safety levels to help our constituents is to attack their security and their welfare.
Prince Harry's memoir Spare has finally hit bookshelves, but his version of some events has been thrown into doubt. In the book, the Duke of Sussex writes that he heard about the death of his great-grandmother, the Queen Mother, in a phone call whilst at Eton. She died in March 2002. But GBNews has uncovered photographic evidence which shows the Prince returning from a skiing trip to Switzerland with his father and brother at the time. Representatives of the Duke have been contacted for comment. New figures show there was a sharp rise in excess deaths across England and Wales at the end of last year. The latest from the Office for National Statistics show the number of registered deaths was 20% higher than average in the final week of December. The ONS says the flu, cold weather and reduced access to emergency care likely contributed. This is GB News TV, online and DAB+ radio. Back now to Patrick.
OK, welcome back, people. Now, despite stubbornly high inflation, UK retailers saw a rise in sales last month. That's up by 6.9% on last December. So that's according to new figures from the British Retail Consortium. But as the cost of living crisis rumbles on, there's signs of shoppers heading to discount supermarkets over premium ones, looking to bag themselves a bargain. Joining me now is our economics and business editor who wouldn't be seen dead in a little. It's Liam Halligan with On the Money. Waitrose?
I like a little. You go in for a can of beans, you come out with a canoe.
It's true. It's so true.
Or an air pump.
The mystery aisle in the middle.
Come out with a tent.
Yeah.
Oh, I needed a tent.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Right, what's on, Liam? What you got for us?
Interesting numbers today, Patrick. These aren't official Office for National Statistics numbers that you just cited. They're from the British Retail Consortium, which is a very respected industry body. And as you said, in December 2022, UK retail sales were up 6.9% on 2021. In November, they were up 4.2% on the same month in 2021. But for the full year of 2022, they were up only 3.1%.
Right.
And bear in mind also that inflation is 10.9%. Why did I put that inflation number on the end? The reason is, Patrick, because that 6.9% rise in retail sales in December, while it sounds really great, there's no recession, the economy's buoyant, retailers' tills are full of cash, everyone's doing really well. Consider that inflation is much higher than the rate of retail sales. What that means is that the goods that people are actually getting are lower than they were. This is what inflation does. It turns healthy-looking numbers into ghastly realities on the ground. So the fact is that retail sales are going up, but because of inflation, the value of what people are actually buying is going down, the value to them, because their wages are being denuded by inflation. And as the British Retail Consortium says, that means that retailers aren't actually doing very well. They're still in for a difficult few months. Here's Cole Hamer.
And we know from the war in Ukraine the effect that it's had on the cost of food and on the cost of energy. And that transcends the whole supply chain. So we're trying to get product into the country, then transporting it across land and into stores, and then heating and chilling, providing chillers in stores. All of this adds to the cost of doing business, and therefore consumers are having to pay a higher price for their goods than they would have done otherwise.
OK, right, now, Liam, we were laughing and joking a bit before, but discount stores, discounters are rather on the increase, aren't they? People, I suppose, are going to them more.
Look, the likes of Tesco and Sainsbury's, the mid-market giants of British food retailing, they still have the lion's share of the market. But those discounters, Lidl and Aldi, they're coming up on the rails because people are looking to bag a bargain. And don't just take my word for it. The magazine which is highly respected, it put together a basket of 48 goods and looked at how much that basket of goods, typical household
weekly
goods
shop
would cost.
Stuff, yeah?
Well, it's not so much a weekly shop. That's more of a supermarket trolley. This is just a basket of goods.
Okay.
So Aldi, £81.63. The same 48 goods in Lidl would be £83.24. The same basket in Tesco, a bit more, £93.42. And then Waitrose, Patrick, as you will know...
I will know. Yeah.
All that creme fraiche that you can't do without, I know. Yeah. And that Greek yoghurt, of course.
The olive tapenade.
£112.63. Yeah. Now, in fairness, the same Which survey, and, Which really know what they're doing. They survey shoppers. They've been doing it for decades, highly respected. The same Which survey showed if you go to the full, weekly shop, a big supermarket trolley, Asda actually comes through the middle as being particularly good value. But what a lot of the discounters are doing, and this is absolute standard practice, is they will discount some of the real necessities that people need, bread, milk and so on, to get you through the door, and then the rest of the stuff that they sell, so you get a bargain on that, and then the rest of the stuff that they sell you is where they make their money. So what we're seeing with this inflation, with this cost of living squeeze, with households looking to make ends meet, having to stretch their budgets, high energy bills, we're seeing the shape of British food retail changing.
Absolutely.
Tesco and Sainsbury's still dominate. Asda too are very, very strong, those mid-market brands, but the discounters are on the march, and that's good news for consumers.
There is snobbery out there. I wonder whether or not Waitrose will weather it. I suspect it will, but...
Reassuringly expensive, that's what Waitrose are. But the mid-market ones, they're going to be watching what's going on.
They are going to be watching what's going on. This is true as well. I was in Lidl. No, I didn't get lost. I do occasionally go into Lidl. I was in Lidl... prefer Aldi, though, actually. And as I was in there, a woman was on the phone to someone else saying that she was doing the weekly shop in Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
So there's snobbery out there.
Of course. That's why people like to have their sort of posh supermarket bags for life that they carry around.
Yeah. Well, I did that. I put it in a Waitrose bag.
As budgets get tighter, shoppers are voting with their feet, and that's good news for consumers.
All right, thank you very much. I dropped and this is no word of a lie, I dropped my laundry off in a Fortnum & Mason's bag the other day. Anyway, that's enough about me, man of the people. Patrick Christys right here on GB News. Coming up, cheers, Leo. Can Boris bounce back? The former Prime Minister is making a major speech tonight, which some say could signal the start of his leadership comeback. I've been asking you, and the emails have been fantastic on this so far, because so many of you go, bring back Boris. I want to know, all right, why? Why do you want to bring back Boris? What is it about the guy? Why do you want the big guy back? GBViews at gbnews.uk. I'll be back in a tick.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Well, people, all of the Bring Back Boris Brigade are out in force yet again. GBViews at GBnews.uk. Amanda, I think we should bring him back. He's the one we voted for. Sally's just said, yes, 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 yes. Not the only time a woman said that to Boris, is it? Anyway, it looks as though the Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, may have been trying to erase a former Prime Minister from memory as he tweeted a picture of his visit to Spaceport Cornwall, photoshopping out Boris Johnson. In case you're wondering where Boris should be, there, smack bang in the middle of the picture. So there we are. Grant Photoshopped there, just getting it out. Anyway, for those of you watching on TV and online, you can see this original photograph here with former Prime Minister front and centre. But a simple Photoshop doesn't look as though it'll be enough to stop a potential leadership comeback from Boris Johnson, set to make a keynote speech this evening. The overwhelming thing in the inbox at the minute appears to be the fact that you actually did vote for Boris and you haven't really had much chance to vote for anyone else since. Therefore, that's why a lot of you would want him back. But a range of views. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is with us in the studio. I have not seen you in the flesh for a long time.
I know.
You're looking well.
It's very good.
Yes.
Happy New Year. Can we still say Happy New Year?
I'm going to call it after today. That's
I think this is it.
We'll draw a line in the sand. That's it. Anyway, Boris, is he coming back?
No, I think is the honest answer. He's going to make this speech tonight, so all Conservative Prime Ministers get the chance to unveil a portrait at the Carlton Club, which is a private members' club in Westminster. In fact, it's been the centre of two of the biggest scandals of Boris Johnson's premiership, Owen Pater's affair and the Chris Pincher affair that ultimately brought him down. But he's going to go there. He's going to make a speech tonight. I'm sure he's going to reflect on his time as Prime Minister. He'll make lots of jokes. He'll be among friends. I'm sure it'll be a very jolly occasion. And he'll talk about, you know, some of the big issues that he still feels very passionate about, whether that be Brexit or the war in Ukraine, and amid other things. But the reason that this has taken slightly more interest than you would normally get for a Prime Minister unveiling a portrait of themselves is that lots of you say the Boris Brigade, people like Nadine Dorris and Lord Cruddas and others, have been making it very clear at the weekend that they want to see Boris back. They reckon that the Conservative Party are going to be devastated at the next election if Boris Johnson is not the leader again. And there's been a thought process, you know, with Rishi Sunak, who opinion polls haven't improved very much since he became Minister.
No, they've not.
If he does very badly in the local elections, that Boris might look at a comeback then. Now, the Prime Minister, or former Prime Minister, sorry, has kept his cards very close to his chest. I'm sure he would love us all to be speculating about whether he will come back or not. My two little things that I would say make it way less likely than likely are, first of all, there is still this standards committee that's looking into whether he lied to Parliament.
Well, Rishi Sunak is potentially embroiled in that as well, isn't he?
Well, because that one's... I mean, well, he broke the law, just like Boris did, but this is looking into whether he misled Parliament. And the second thing is, I just think it would destroy the Conservative Party, and the party would be divided, because for all the people who love Boris Johnson in the Conservative Party, there are a lot of people who dislike it.
It's interesting, though, isn't it, which is like Cathy, for example, has been on. And this is what I think, Cathy, a lot of people of your mindset would say, which is Boris brings you heart, he tends to do well against Labour, goes down quite well in the north. She says he really has a plan for Britain. I think Boris Johnson was very good at saying that he had a plan for Britain, you know. She says she would vote for him. He seems like a nice guy. And this is one of the things, Darren, undeniably, Boris Johnson could do anything and people just still love him.
There is no doubt he was a massive electoral asset to the Conservative Party. There is no doubt, you know, he did very, very well. Got the biggest majority of the Conservative Party since 1987, back in 2019. And there is no doubt, you know, he made some good decisions in government that I think people would even his critics would say he got right on things like the vaccine programme and the war in Ukraine. But at the end of the day, he did resign as Prime Minister only last July, and he resigned because he'd lost the support of the party. And that hasn't fundamentally changed.
Exactly, and I reckon he might be banking on the idea that they go, well, right, do you want to win the next general election or not? And if the answer to that question is yes, I do want to win it, and he appears to be maybe the only person who can win it, then I suppose the noises will get louder, but we'd have to wait and see. Thank you very much, Darren, as ever, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, there. Now, I can also speak to Alex Storey, who is the leader of the Bring Back Boris campaign. Alex, the emails are coming in thick and fast. It's mostly pro-Boris. However, there's quite a few people saying, no, it would be a return. He did absolutely nothing with an outstanding 80-seat majority. He's got his green agenda. He's not a committed Conservative. Good grief. What do you say to all of that?
Well, I mean, quite a lot of it is true. I mean, he is part. He supports the Green New Deal, which is an issue. He hasn't done a huge amount since 2019. He had huge amounts of potential to do something. A couple of things that we need to say is that the pandemic hit. He was on the right tracks initially when he decided that Britain would not lock down, but he then was scared into locking us down because of the expert class, including people like Neil Ferguson. That needs to be said. But the reason why people are pro him is because one of the reasons why so many people are for Boris is because they voted for him. The interesting thing with Sunak is that nobody voted for him at all. He has no mandate and no legitimacy. And I think a lot of people want to be the judges of how good or bad Boris was.
Well, you see, this is the thing as well. It's interesting as well how he can control the narrative on this. Or, frankly, this is one of the things I think is a good excuse for Boris Johnson, because he's not really controlling the narrative on this. It's just the way that it follows him around. He's a bit Teflon, isn't he? Like Clive saying he is the only person who, quotes, got things done. And that is, of course, the line that Boris Johnson would like people to have. Realistically, though, Alex, to be honest with you, part of me gets a bit fed up about continually talking about the return of Boris Johnson. In your heart of hearts, do you think he's going to do it? And, very quickly, how?
Well, actually, what we're trying to do with the Bring Boris Back campaign has changed and morphed into something else called the Conservative Democratic Organisation. We're trying to change the Conservative Party so that the leader of the party next time cannot be removed by a small group of MPs. Your guest earlier said something that's not quite right. Boris did not lose the House, and he didn't lose the party. It was a small number of people who got rid of him under a lot of pressure. The point is that Boris is probably not going to be able to come back. What we want to try and make sure is that the Conservative Party is reformed such that something like this, when the elected leader of a political party is not removed by a small group of people.
OK, look, Alex, thank you very much. I'll talk to you again soon, no doubt. Alex Story, the leader of the Bring Back Boris campaign. Boris Johnson giving a speech later today as a big portrait of himself is unfurled at the Carlton Club, so right for some. And we're going to be reacting to that. Do you think this could be the start of bringing Boris back? Would you have him back? I'm asking you, for a lot of the people, the hundreds, if not thousands of people who always email in to say, I would bring Boris back. I want to know why, OK? Get them coming in. Now, this afternoon, Labour has promised a package of welfare reforms to get people back into work and end what the party is calling a monumental waste of human potential. That's no way to talk about Keir Starmer, is it? Anyway, the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Jonathan Ashworth, announced the plans which include granting local areas more power to get people into work, longer-term help for the unemployed, and a particular focus on supporting the over-50s back into work. Now, GB News' political reporter Olivia Utley joins me now. Peter Edwards is also in the studio as well, former editor of Labour List. Olivia, I'll start with you. Give us it in a nutshell, please.
Well, actually, the reforms that he actually put forward were pretty unambitious in scope. There were some interesting nuggets in there, and he's clearly thought things through properly. It would involve rejigging...
Slight problem with your mic. I'm going to throw it to Peter. We'll get your mic sorted. Peter, your hot take.
Well, it's nice to be called hot, it's a rarity. 630,000 people approximately left the workforce after the pandemic. There's a suggestion lots of those are people in the second half of their career. Labour's trying to get them back into work. Why? First of all, it's good for the economy. We know the economy's been in a bit of a rotten position the last few years. Secondly, there's a wide perception that Tory benefit measures for the last decade have been cruel. And thirdly, Labour's lost a lot of elections, and a couple of the reasons have been due to the deficit and welfare. So trying to do something about those is good for individuals and the wider economy.
So do we have any real idea how we're going to get people like the over-50s back into work? Because, to be honest with you, I would imagine once you've retired, the idea of going back to work, unless you're just bored of the wife's nagging you, there's no point, is there?
Well, I think Labour wants to do a couple of things. There's this so-called midlife MOT that's in government already. I think Labour wants to make that better, where people aged 40 and 50 upwards, government departments engage with them to ensure they can back to work, whether that's their health or a skills or an availability and childcare issue. And, of course, the other thing is the dreaded work capability assessment for people who have got chronic health problems but can do some work, even if it's not 35 hours a week. So to make that lighter or more flexible.
OK, all right, and I suppose, as ever, you're back in the room.
I'm back.
Right, OK, we'll pick up where you left off, but just following on from what Peter said there as well, how's Labour costing all of this stuff? Does it need to be massively costed, do we know?
Well, yes, it does need to be costed, and Jonathan Ashurst was at pains to point out that he wouldn't be profligate with public funds. He said that we've seen the dangers of that. He was very keen to show that Labour would be capable of seizing the centre ground. When he was asked about costing, I asked him, for example, what he'd do about the NHS waiting list, which is obviously one reason why people are unable to go to work. They're waiting for treatment. He said that the Labour's answer would be to recruit more healthcare workers. So I asked him how he'd pay for that, and he went for the old line of we'd scrap non-dom status, which we do here over and over again. Otherwise, the reforms were pretty thin on the ground, as we've heard there. He was talking about adapting something that the Conservatives have already brought in. And for universal credit, he would actually keep it in place, even though it was a Keir Starmer election pledge to ditch it altogether. So that was quite interesting. For me, the biggest thing was the language of the speech. The language was all about seizing the centre ground. It was about rights and responsibilities in the welfare system, not just giving out benefits to anyone who wants them.
Well, on that, that's interesting. On that, that's interesting. I'll bring you in now for this, Peter. I'm just reading here again, you know, longer-term help for the unemployed. I mean, that could be taken two ways, couldn't it? Either maybe more training for them to help them get into work, or just more benefits.
Well, I think it should be the former. One, because public money is in short supply, even more so after COVID. And I think Labour, quite rightly, has absorbed the message from the public about why it's lost some elections. So briefly, when I worked for Shadow Cabinet Minister in 2015, remember, we were told it's going to be even Stevens going into election. David Cameron won fairly easily. But several of the reasons given were deficit, welfare and immigration. It's interesting, you've alluded to all of those in just the last few minutes, because it knits together economic problems, but also problems about perceptions of Labour that I think we're now changing.
Well, are you? I'll sit with you on this one. Are you? Because it is a bit tricky for the moment. From where I'm sitting, Labour can seem a bit wishy-washy on things like immigration, for example. There seems to be, in a cost of living crisis, the idea the British public might elect a government that appears to want to spend more public money just immediately after the coronavirus crisis as well. I'm not sure that washes a lot of people.
Well, I don't think that's a fair critique about Labour wanting to spend more money. I think that was certainly the case under Jeremy Corbyn, where you had this kind of thing about nationalising the whole internet a few weeks before the general election. I think we're in a very different place now, and with Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, the goal will be just like in 2015. You go into a general election with no spending commitments, because everything is funded by growing the economy or a tax or a saving elsewhere. So that would mean no spending commitments.
OK, that's interesting. Olivia, would you buy that? Do you think Labour are becoming more economically sound or not?
Well, yes, but no spending commitments essentially means promising lots of things and not actually saying how you're going to cost them, and hiding that by sort of talking about not saying the details. So I'm not sure if that's going to work right up to the election. But Jonathan Ashworth clearly has thought through exactly what he would do broadly, and that was quite interesting to see. Basically, it feels as though we have entered election mode now for the whole of Westminster.
Olivia, thank you very much. Olivia Utley, our political reporter. Peter Edwards, thank you yet again. Cheers for popping yourself into the studio as well. Always much appreciated, Peter Edwards there. Right, loads of you have been getting in touch. gbnews@gbnews.uk, you all know that email address right now. Back on to Boris. Yes, a lot of you were saying, bring back Boris. OK, so I was asking why. I get emails every single day, bring back Boris, but rarely people say why, right? So this is why I'm asking. I can't actually stand any of them, but he was the least rotten in a bag of mouldy tomatoes. You might not be wrong. Some would argue that you are wrong about that, Kitty. I would not be one of those people. But is that realistically a reason to bring somebody back? You know, he smells the least bad, essentially. Anyway, Pete says, I wish Boris would switch to reform. I think they could win the next election with him after the way the Conservatives treated him and their behaviour since. I'll never vote Conservative again. Well, it's interesting you mentioned reform there. Reform supposedly, under some polls anyway, overtaking the Lib Dems in certain areas there. That would make them the third party, not including the SNP, of course. Anyway, Mark says Boris has many flaws, but he knows to keep our country together for the future, he must remove the globalist Rishi Sunak. It's simple. I'd vote Boris. OK, so I was keeping Britain together there, apparently. And Mike says, no, we do not want a repeat of more of the same. This Tory government has ruined this country and the wealth is unfairly distributed. So a range of views. Thank you very much, everybody. Now, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Stay tuned, because there's a little story that I've been holding back from you because we wanted to make sure that we had it properly and we had it all set up for you. But I'm going to be leading with it towards the top of the next hour, and again at the 5 o'clock hour as well. And it is a big one, and I know it's going to get you all going. It includes a plan to house hundreds of asylum seekers in a former hotel in a village of only 500 people. So roughly that amount of people are going to be moved into that village. We're going to go to the village and we're going to give you all the latest from there as well. I'll be back in a moment.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing! You remind me of me in the European Parliament.
But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back, everybody. It's just gone 4 o'clock. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, OK, it's finally here. Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, hit the bookshelves today. We pretty much know what's in the inside pages. Claim after claim that Harry's been let down by his family. The ball's in their court. When will it end, Harry? Hopefully soon. But despite almost everything being leaked ahead of its release today in bookshops, small queues were outside. So it wasn't your, Black Friday type thing where people are queuing up and breaking shop windows and all of this. In fact, I would argue that the sale of that energy drink Prime probably did better than Prince Harry's book. But this afternoon, GB News' very own Cameron Walker was ferreting away and he found some inconsistencies in some of the accounts by Prince Harry, and it makes you wonder, what else is inconsistent, Harry? What else? I want to know, will you read it? Do you care? Has Harry done irreparable damage to the monarchy? Get your views coming in. Also this hour, the Chief Executive of London Ambulance Service says no more than half of ambulance staff in London will go on strike tomorrow as they aim to ensure life and limb-threatening 999 calls are answered. Daniel O'Kelly's comments come as the government has introduced a bill to maintain a minimum service level. Do you support the move? Do you think that some people lose the right to strike by virtue of what job they do? And this, I suspect, is probably going to be the big one this hour. We've been holding this back a little bit for you, but I can now actually get this out there, which is good. We're going to be doing it a lot in this hour and a lot in the next hour. The Home Office plans to house up to 400 asylum seekers in a former hotel in a village of only 500 people in West Northamptonshire. Anyway, it's been slammed by the local council. We are going to go live ahead of a parish council meeting to discuss the issue later today. We will be on the scene and we'll be picking this up throughout the course of the show. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I want to know from you, in light of what we're hearing there, If a migrant hotel popped up in your town or your village, would you oppose it? GB Views at gbnews.uk. Now to your headlines.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Our top story today, the RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch has called the government's new anti-strike bill an attack on human rights. The legislation will require levels of service from ambulance staff, firefighters and railway workers during industrial action. It comes amid a wave of industrial action across the public sector in a dispute over pay. The Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, says the legislation is necessary to protect the public.
To deny and to vote against legislation that brings in minimum safety levels to help our constituents is to attack their security and their welfare.
Meanwhile, the Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner says the system was failing before the strikes began.
Is my constituent Spina, who waited over an hour for an ambulance, who died waiting for an ambulance, and that was not on a strike day. That is because of the disastrous chaos we have in the system under this Conservative government.
Well, ambulance workers in England and Wales are set to go on strike tomorrow after talks with the government over pay failed to reach a resolution. It's the first industrial action within the health sector this year, with nurses in England also set to walk out later this month. The Health Secretary has described the action as unhelpful, but insisted he is working with trade unions. Steve Barclay also saying the government isn't looking to backdate a pay increase for NHS workers.
We don't think it would be appropriate to go back to last April, to retrospectively go back all those months in terms of what has already happened this year. We had a process that looked at the issues in the round, but at the same time we want to listen to the trade unions, we want to engage with them constructively, we want to get the right evidence into the pay review body next year, and of course they made further representations in terms of this year, notwithstanding that we're more than 3/4 of the way through the year, and it is right that we listen to those concerns.
Meanwhile, teachers in schools across Scotland are on the first of their two-day strike today after failing to reach an agreement over pay with the Scottish Government. The current offer would see most staff in classrooms receive a 5% pay rise, but unions are demanding a 10% increase. Primary school teachers will walk out today, while staff at secondary schools will walk out tomorrow. And Labour has promised a package of welfare reforms under their leadership to help people return to work. Under the plan, the claimants will try paid work, and if it doesn't work out within a year, they can go back to the benefits they were previously on. The Labour Party also plans a further reform of employment support for the over 50s. Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth claims the reforms will help disabled people or those on sickness benefits find work.
What I'm proposing today are new measures, new reforms, new thinking to support people who say they want to return to work. Now, in this country, we've got 1 million people looking for work who want a job, and we've got hundreds of thousands of people who are currently designated as long-term sick, but say they would want to work if given the right support.
Now, the UK's first ever space launch ended in failure last night after engineers said the craft had suffered an anomaly. The Virgin Orbit jet took off successfully from Cornwall late last night, carrying a rocket with 9 small satellites to launch over the Atlantic Ocean. However, the American firm says the rocket failed to enter the orbit after it was released. There'll be an investigation into what happened over the coming days. Amazon UK says it plans to shut down 3 UK warehouses, which could impact more than 1,000 jobs. The company launched consultations at sites in Hemel Hempstead, Doncaster and Gourock. It's understood workers will be offered roles at other Amazon locations. The company's also revealed plans for 2 major centres in the West Midlands and the North East, which will create 2,500 jobs over the next 3 years. Now, as you've been hearing, Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, has finally hit the bookshelves, but his version of some events has been thrown into doubt. In the book, the Duke of Sussex writes that he heard about the death of his great-grandmother, the Queen Mother, in a phone call whilst he was at Eton. She died in March 2002. But GB News has uncovered photographic evidence which shows the Prince returned from a skiing trip to Switzerland with his father and brother at the time. Representatives of the Duke have been contacted for comment. A teacher in the United States has been hailed a hero after evacuating pupils from their classroom after being shot by a 6-year-old boy. 25-year-old Abigail Zwerner was shot by one of her pupils at Richneck Elementary School in Virginia last week. Police say the boy fired one shot, which hit her hand and chest, but the teacher still managed to escort her students to safety. She's in hospital in a stable condition. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
OK, welcome along. We've got an action-packed hour for you here. We are very shortly going to be doing the latest on Spare. That's Harry's book. It hit the shelves today. We're expecting massive queues and it to be sold out, but actually, apparently you could have fired a cannon in Waterstones or wherever bookshops are called earlier on today, and you wouldn't have hit anyone because there weren't that many people buying it. But we're moving on very quickly because something has just dropped for us that I want to not miss out on. First, trade unions and ministers are on course for a fresh clash after the Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, announced a plan to introduce new laws which would require minimum levels of service for public sector workers. We know what this is. It's the quotes-unquote anti-strike laws stuff. We did it a bit last hour, but we're moving it on now because the proposals were condemned as unworkable and illegal by the unions, warning that new legislation would lead to even more walkouts. Here's, for a bit of context anyway, what the Business Secretary said in the House of Commons earlier on.
To deny and to vote against legislation that brings in minimum safety levels to help our constituents is to attack their security and their welfare.
OK, so I am joined now by Labour MP for Birmingham, Selly Oak. It's Steve McCabe. Steve, thank you very much. We were going to have you on a little bit later, but I understand you've got to go and vote, so we thought we'd squeeze you in at the top. Oh, no, how dare you do your job? But there we go. Anyway, right, so it's all very well and good for, you know, Labour to be anti these strike laws, I suppose, but as far as I can tell, Labour's policy is to not pay the workers anymore, but also not bring in anything to stop the strike. So we have a cycle of strikes under Labour, don't we?
Well, that certainly wasn't the experience under the last Labour government. We had one of the lowest number of strike days in years during that period of government. So I don't know where that suggestion comes from.
No, the suggestion has come... No, let me just clarify that, because it's just what Keir Starmer said last week when he did his announcement. He was basically saying, look, we haven't got a massive chequebook, which means we're not really going to be giving out these whopping great big public sector pay rises, but he is opposed to any anti-strike legislation. Well, from where I'm sitting, that just means, well, that's where we are now, isn't it?
Well, no, because what we've suggested is that what you have to do is enter into meaningful negotiations and try to create realistic and long-term working conditions. And that's what we would be seeking to do if we were in power now. And that's what we will seek to do if we win the election.
OK, all right. So you'd urge Labour to not back any kind of anti-strike laws. Some people would say that only furthers the notion that you're in the pockets of the unions.
No, I think the problem is, look, this is just a ruse by the Conservatives to divert attention from the economic industrial mess that they've got the country into. That's the problem. And it's really Rishi Sunak trying to throw a bit of red meat to his own rabid right-wingers who he can't control and who are already trying to undermine him and organise to get rid of him. So I think this is nothing more than just a diversionary tactic. I think it's not necessary because trade unions are already required under law to provide life and limb cover. I don't think it's needed at all. I'm not at all sure how it will work. And it's interesting that the government talks about minimum standards, but they won't impose minimum standards for the number of nurses we need to safely run a ward. If they're so concerned about minimum standards, why don't they introduce that?
That's interesting, yes. Talking of standards, I did read with some interest earlier on about some MPs receiving donations, including Just Stop Oil. Sir Keir's Just Stop Oil donor. Apparently, Dale Vance gave Keir Starmer's leadership campaign £20,000 in 2020. Since the last election, he's donated £360,000 to the party. These are just the latest figures. Is Labour not just in the pockets of the unions, but in the pockets of the eco mob as well?
Well, I think if you heard Keir talk the other week about Just Stop Oil, you'd find that hard to believe. No, I think that just shows that you can give money to the Labour Party if you want, but you have very little influence over the way we develop policy, because we develop policy through our own structure with our members.
OK, all right, fair enough. I thought you were going to carry on a bit then, but no, you stopped rather abruptly. So people don't have to worry about Keir Starmer being lobbied too hard by Just Stop Oil. I mean, I've got a quote here from the Dave Vance, who gave your party a boatload of cash. He says, "I did it to help them win, to help them into government so that they have the chance to deliver their agenda, which is my agenda, social justice and a green economy." I mean, do you not think the public have a right to be confused about the fact that you guys did receive money from those numpties who were gluing themselves to stuff and hanging off bridges, you know? You could have turned it down, couldn't you?
Well, we could have turned it down. That is perfectly true. I'm not going to argue with you on that. But what I'm saying is that what we are committed to is a lawful green agenda that creates jobs and creates stability in the energy market and helps lower energy prices. We're not interested in the antics of people from Just Stop Oil. And we could refuse that money just as the Tory party could refuse and give back all the money it's had from the Russian oligarchs, some of which are now sanctioned.
Yep, well deflected. There we go. That is Labour MP for Birmingham, Selly Oak. It's Steve McCabe. Thank you very much, Steve. And enjoy the vote later. All right, OK, so we are going to get back now to Harry's book, OK? So Harry's book, Spare, it's finally hit the British bookshelves. I did get it. A reliable source told me there was a bigger queue outside Wetherspoons and Waterstones earlier on at 8 a.m. when it actually broke. But there we go. Some bookshops opened at midnight so people could get their hands on the copy of the Duke's version of events. But queues were reportedly sparse and not the flurry that Harry was hoping for. The Duke of Sussex gives readers an insight into his life, sharing intimate details and exposing the royals, or certain elements of the royals anyway. But today, he has said that he hopes his children will still bond with his family despite the bombshell publication. Not a lot going on between the ears, is there? To save you having read all the 416 pages. Grief. Here's our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, with a quick rundown for you.
Several secrets spill off the pages of the 416-page memoir from the Duke of Sussex. Today, it's placed on British bookshelves for the first time. Prince Harry, in his own words, describing what it was like growing up in what he sees as Prince William's shadow. The broadsides and claims paint the tragic story of a man who ultimately blames the press for what he sees as their part in the death of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. In a promo interview, he branded the Queen Consort dangerous for forging connections with the British press to improve her image. In the book, Harry even accused his own brother, William, the heir, of physically attacking him. Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have not commented on Prince Harry's allegations. Friends of Prince William reportedly told the Sunday Times he's keeping a dignified silence for the sake of the monarchy. The Prince of Wales wants to keep the spotlight firmly on his charity work and avoid distracting headlines. And the late Queen's motto of never complain, never explain appears to be working for the firm. Prince Harry's popularity has sunk to a record low in the UK according to the latest YouGov poll, following his claims that the royal family briefed the press to make him and his wife Meghan look like villains. Prince Harry chose to include some deeply personal stories like how he lost his virginity, but touched on more serious topics, claiming he killed 25 Taliban fighters during his second tour of Afghanistan when he was serving as a British soldier. Several former soldiers are worried Prince Harry's claim will make him, his family, and the British Army more of a target for terrorism. The Prince also describes how he turns to drink and drugs to cope with his mental health struggles, and writes about a private conversation he once had with his father, now the King. Prince Harry says he wants reconciliation with his brother and father, whose coronation is just months away. But the rift runs deep in the House of Windsor, and it's understood both sides wants the other to accept some responsibility. Cameron Walker, GB News.
It's less Game of Thrones, more Game of Moans at this point, isn't it? But our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, has unveiled Harry's ability to accurately recall events has been called into serious doubt. So, inconsistencies, OK? We very nearly had an inconsistency over how many pages were in this book, but Cameron, who's now got the book with him, has assured me that it is around 416 pages, but that's if you include the bits at the start and the bits at the end, which aren't numbers.
I mean, Amazon it says it's 416. I count 410 plus a few pages, which aren't numbered.
He can't even get that right. You know, he can't even get that right. And this is really saying something. No, but seriously, he has actually, well, of course, recollections may vary over how he was told of the Queen Mother's death, and it calls into question how true other things are.
Exactly, Patrick. So there is an inconsistency, appears to be an inconsistency of Harry's version of events following the death of the Queen Mother. So I'm just going to read what Prince Harry writes in his memoir, Spare. So Harry reads, at Eton, while studying, I took the call... Sorry, Harry writes even. Yeah. At Eton, while studying, I took the call. I wish I could remember whose voice was at the other end, a courtier's, I believe. I recall that it was just before Easter, the weather bright and warm, light slanting through my window, filled with vivid colours. Your Royal Highness, the Queen Mother, has died. Now, from news reports at the time suggests that his father, now King, but then Prince Charles, Prince William and Prince Harry were on holiday skiing in Switzerland. It was also Easter Saturday when the Queen Mother passed away, so presumably schools were on holiday and Eton was perhaps shut. I also spoke to a former royal correspondent who was on the beginning of that ski trip with William, Harry and Charles, because there was this pre-arranged photo call for journalists to take pictures of the royal children and their father in exchange for then leaving the ski resort so Charles, William and Harry could ski in private alone to enjoy their holiday. Yeah. So the former royal correspondent told me that they, as in the journalists, had just landed back in England, having left the royal party in Switzerland when they received news that the Queen Mother was gravely ill. And GB News has now uncovered a photograph which claims to show, taken on the 31st of March 2002, Harry, Charles and William having stepped off a plane back in the UK and going into a car following the announcements that the Queen Mother had died. So the two accounts, all that information I've just given you, and what Prince Harry claims in his memoir that he was studying at Eton when he took a phone call, there seems to be an inconsistency here. Now, there's no suggestion at all that Prince Harry deliberately told a mistruth. In fact, the former royal correspondent suggested to me that perhaps it was an honest mistake, a lapse in memory, perhaps.
But it does raise the question, doesn't it? Potentially going forward as to what other potential inconsistencies may there be in a book that is full of quite incendiary remarks?
Yes, that's certainly the accusation. That's certainly the argument. Of course, neither of us were there when this was happening.
I've never been to Eton, or indeed Switzerland.
But it does weaken the argument, and it does raise the question of what other inconsistencies may or may not be in Prince Harry's memoir.
Absolutely. Well, Cameron, well fished out. That'll be making headlines. Thank you very much for that.
I must just say that Harry's spokesperson has been contacted for comment.
Good. Well, we await, don't we? We await. Anyway, thank you very much. Can I just say quickly, just before we move on, just on this, this does sound like when you're trying to fill out a word count at a university essay. Days later at Eton I took the call. I wish I could remember whose voice it was, and it's like the weather bright and warm, light slanting through. Moreover, hitherto, these are all words that could have been added to the word count, couldn't they? But
well, a ghostwriter helped him write it.
Yes.
J.R. Moeringer.
Wow, there you go. Taking it with him. Thank you very much. Right, OK, we're going to go now to GB News viewers. Lee Harris in Bristol. We've double Harrised. Are you related? We've got Susan Harris in Carmarthenshire and Lee Harris in Bristol. Have you ever met?
No.
Right, OK, well, there you go. Well, what are the chances of this? Lee, I'll start with you. Go on, then. I mean, what have you made of Prince Harry's book so far from what you've heard about it, or what do you think? Think he's damaged the monarchy?
I think he is damaging the monarchy. I mean, according to the latest, I know this has been said, but according to the latest YouGov poll, Prince Harry's popularity has sunk to a record low in the UK, and I'm not surprised. And that was before the book was released, so no doubt it's going to get worse, probably. I watched the interview And what got me was his extreme arrogance and hypocrisy. He took absolutely no responsibility for anything. Everything was everyone else's fault. And it was their responsibility to apologise to him, by him saying the ball's in their court. In my opinion, it was a masterclass in how to utterly destroy your own reputation. But he's just a hypocrite.
Yeah, well, Susan, I'll throw it over to you now. Susan in Carmarthenshire. When the dust settles on this and Harry realises that he's put everything out there in his own words, he's cherry-picked which TV interviews he wants to do, and people still hate him, then he's surely only got himself to blame, Susan.
Well, of course he has. But I'd like to congratulate Tom Bradley and ITV for presenting a very upmarket version of the Jeremy Kyle show. All that was missing is the obligatory paternity test. And Harry has written this book called It's Spare. If you rearrange the letters, it can make the word spear, which I think is thrown into his family, and he will regret it, because there's only so much that he can write about. I don't think for 1 minute he'll be allowed back into the family. He's trashed his family. He's trashed his country. He's made his family a sitting target. He's made servicemen a sitting target. Yeah. And he sold his soul to the devil for 30 pieces of silver. And the day will come when he can't make the money that he's making now. No. And I think he'll be dumped. And Susan, there won't be anybody there to pick him up.
Park it there, and I'll go back to you, Susan. I'll bring Lee back in. Lee, if Prince Harry walked past you in the street right now, what would you say?
Oh, goodness. I'd tell him to stop being such a big baby. He's... And just think about what he's an ultra privileged multimillionaire who's whinging about his life during a cost of living crisis. Just have a bit of self-awareness. That's the bit that I just don't understand. Again, going back to hypocrisy, he accuses the press of invading his privacy, but he's happy to let the world's media into his own private life. And he's doing the exact same thing to his own family by leaking these private conversations. He says he didn't say that his own family are racist, but he's just been on a 2-year campaign using the full weight of the global woke lefty media to portray the royal family as racist. I mean, he must think we're all stupid. He's completely deluded.
All right, Susan, you've got 15 seconds. What would you say to Prince Harry? Don't swear.
Go away, take your money, take your lovely wife, take your lovely 2 children, go back to Montecito and keep your mouth shut, because we're all fed up of hearing everything you've got to say.
Fantastic, both of you.
And that's about it.
Well, you know what? That's more than enough. I tell you, you should both have your own show. The 2 Harrises here on GB News. Lee Harris in Bristol, Susan Harris in Carmarthenshire. Wonderful stuff. You wonderful people. I'll see you soon, no doubt. Right, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, I've been teasing the living heck out of this, but with good reason. It's a belter of a story. We've got it, and it's the plan to house hundreds of asylum seekers in a village with just 500 residents. So 400 asylum seekers, village has got 500 people in. It's madness. We'll be going live to that village very, very soon. I'll be back in a tick.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, OK, so controversy has emerged over a Home Office plan to house up to 400 asylum seekers in a former 17th century country manor hotel in a small village. The village of Cretan is only home to about 500 residents. Look at that lovely building. If you are listening on radio now, well, it's a really lovely building. Anyway, prompting the proposal to be criticised by Cabinet member and local MP Chris Heaton-Harris, as well as West Northamptonshire Council. The plans were described as unacceptable, totally unsuitable, at a meeting last week. And I'm very pleased to say that GB News' national reporter, Paul Hawkins, joins me now from the village of Cretan in West Northamptonshire. Paul, great, thank you very, very much. I know that you're going to be busy over the course of the next few hours because there's going to be meetings and talkings about it as well. Could you just fill our viewers and our listeners in on exactly what the state of play is there, then, at the moment?
Right, so the state of play at the moment is we're just outside the village of Cretan, population 500, about 9 miles north of Northamptonshire. And this plan first came to light last month, that the Home Office wanted to use this place that's right behind me right now, Highgate House Hotel, or it used to be a hotel. It's a manor home. It's been closed for 2 years. They wanted to use it to house 400 asylum seekers. Of course, there's a huge backlog, 140,000 asylum seekers waiting to have their application processed at the moment by the Home Office. And so it's taking so long to process those applications that the asylum seekers across the UK have to be housed somewhere, and we've heard that many of them are being housed in hotel accommodation. In fact, by the Home Office's own admission, £5.5 million a day is spent on housing asylum seekers in hotels. So the Home Office, the villagers heard about this in Cretan. They're saying that, look, there's only 500 people in our village. Putting another 400 people just a stone's throw away from the village, which, by my reckoning, we've been down there. There doesn't even appear to be a pub there. There's just a village shop there. Simply put, putting that number of people in such a small village, or right next to a small village, it's simply, the village isn't set up to deal with that, and that is why the local MP Chris Heaton-Harris, who's also the Northern Ireland Secretary, has said it's completely unsuitable. We've spoken to the Home Office, and they've said the Home Office doesn't comment on operational arrangements for individual sites used for asylum accommodation. It does say, though, that we engage with local authorities as early as possible whenever sites are used for asylum accommodation, and work to ensure arrangements are safe for hotel residents and local people. We know that Chris Heaton-Harris, the local MP, has set up a kind of consultation through his website, and according to the chairman of the local parish, who I spoke to earlier, he said that he's had at least 350 responses through his website, which he's passed to the Home Office, and so the Home Office are considering those responses. They're consulting, and the parish themselves, they've written to the Home Office saying, look, we just want to know what kind of decision-making process you went through before choosing this 17th century hotel behind us, which has 84 ensuite bedrooms. And when you do the maths, putting 400 people in 84 bedrooms means there's going to be at least 2 or 3 people per bedroom. But that's the state of affairs at the moment. Later on this evening, just after 7, there's another meeting where the public can air their views at the local parish hall, and we're going to be there.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Look, Paul, thank you very, very much. And we're going to be all over this. You're going to be all over this. And we will be talking to you a little bit later on. And then I believe later this evening as well. And thank you very much for bringing us this, because this will be happening in towns and villages right across the country. You know, a village near you, a town near you, like this one here in Cretan, where there's 500 people apparently in area, in that village, and 400. So the population is basically going to be double by virtue of them sending a load of people to this asylum seeker hotel, which just happened to be a 17th century manor house, which was formerly anyway quite a luxurious setting. What do you make of it? Because the other big thing about that is not will it just overwhelmingly change the demographics of the area and the situation in the area. What on earth are these people going to do all day? Paul Hawkins was saying there, well, all there is like one local village shop. Probably good news for the person who owns the local village shop. The sale of sausage rolls are going to go through the roof, or maybe not, depending on where they've come from, I suppose. But where are they actually going to do their business all day? What's actually going to happen? Anyway, we'll be talking about this throughout the course of the show. We will unpack it, and we will be getting reaction later on from, of course, that meeting as well, where no doubt residents will be up in arms. We're going to be speaking to some of those. It's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Boris Johnson is due to deliver a keynote speech tonight. Could this be the beginning of the planned leadership comeback? But first, it's your latest headlines.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. And the headlines this hour. The government has introduced new legislation requiring some unions to ensure a minimum service level during strikes and is confident it'll be passed this year. The new anti-strike bill, as it's known, has received criticism from union bosses, with the RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch calling it an attack on human rights. And the TUC is planning to hold a national Protect the Right to Strike Day on the 1st of February. The Business Secretary Grant Shapps says the legislation is necessary to protect the public.
To deny and to vote against legislation that brings in minimum safety levels to help our constituents is to attack their security and their welfare.
Meanwhile, ambulance workers in England and Wales are set to go on strike tomorrow after talks with the government over pay failed. It's the first industrial action within the health sector this year, with nurses in England also set to walk out later this month. The Health Secretary has described the action as unhelpful, but insisted he is working with trade unions. As you've been hearing, Prince Harry's memoir Spare has finally hit bookshelves, but his version of some events have been thrown into doubt. In the book, the Duke of Sussex writes that he heard about the death of his great-grandmother, the Queen Mother, in a phone call whilst at Eton. She died in March 2002. But GB News has uncovered photographic evidence which shows the Prince returning from a skiing trip to Switzerland with his father and brother at the time. Representatives of the Duke have been contacted for comment. Those are your headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Don't go anywhere. We're back in just a bit.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is due to deliver a keynote speech tonight at the Conservative Party's Carlton Club, which will be attended by his most loyal supporters. The former party leader still intends to stand as an MP at the next general election and still hold support amongst numerous MPs and party members, with one describing tonight as an event where we will be keeping the flame alive. There you go, keeping Boris Johnson's flame alive. So could Boris stage a comeback? With me now is Jerry Hayes, criminal barrister and former Conservative MP, and Albie Amonkona as well, co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism for Equality. Good stuff. Jerry, I'll start with you. Will you be at the Carlton Club?
No, I won't. Of course I won't be at the Carlton Club. I'm in Ipswich, at Ipswich Crown Court. But look, Boris hasn't been spoken about for at least a week. And for him, that is like Katie Price not being on television for a year. He hasn't got much chance of becoming leader again because he doesn't have support from the parliamentary party. What people need now is competence. They want honesty and decency. Next election, he's probably going to lose his seat unless he moves somewhere else. And secondly, he's got the Privileges Committee, which might hook him out of the House of Commons for a few months. So it isn't going to happen, but it's great to talk about.
OK, all right, so you don't think that's going to happen. Albie, what do you reckon? I'm getting hundreds of emails in every time we ask this question. Would you have Boris back? People overwhelmingly in my inbox say yes. If the Conservatives want to win the next general election, do they have to have Boris back?
I can very much understand the appeal of Boris Johnson. He is excellent at campaigning, excellent at winning elections. But there are two huge problems which were just highlighted. The first one being that his current seat of Uxbridge and South Ruislip is a very marginal London seat, which he might lose at the next general election. And, of course, the Privileges investigation into Partygate is yet to be concluded. And anyone who thinks now is the time for Rishi Sunak to step down, for there to be a leadership contest, that Boris Johnson would win with those two unknowns still up in the air, quite frankly, has their head in the clouds. OK, Jerry, do you not think...
There's a better story, Patrick, and I don't know whether you've noticed it on Twitter. Grant Shapps, the business secretary, has actually been airbrushing Boris Johnson out of photographs worthy of Stalin. It's appalling.
Yeah, Grant Photoshopped is what we're calling him here. I mean, it is. Yeah. See, it's not just a hat rack, Jerry. And we've got we've got the picture there as well, which I think is absolutely hilarious. Jerry, do you think that Boris Johnson is just a bit too toxic? You know, he did have his time, and that time has gone. Do you think there will ever be a return of Boris?
You could never say never in politics at all. Good people who watch this programme will want him. A lot of the Tory grassroots will want him. But if you want to get elected, you've got to get to the centre ground, and they don't want him. If you want to win an election, the best chance, it's going to be very difficult, is the guy we've got at the moment, Rishi Sunak. He may be boring, but he's not toxic, he's honourable, and he's decent, and he's competent. I think that's what people want.
Albie, it's the dull men's club we've got at the moment, isn't it? We've got Rishi Sunak, we've got Keir Starmer, we've got Ed Davey. I mean, has anyone actually seen Ed Davey? Is he all right? I mean, I'm surprised you see him on the side of milk cartons in the shops, for goodness sake. Is he around anyway? But, Albie, does Rishi Sunak have that pizzazz, have that character?
Well, first of all, on Ed Davey, I don't think we should waste too much time speaking about him because the Liberal Democrats are pretty much irrelevant nowadays. But on the subject of Rishi Sunak, you know, and boringness, have we forgotten what happened last year? I would quite like a boring year in politics. Last year we had 3 prime ministers, 5 chancellors, God knows how many health secretaries. It's time to get back on track and actually get back on track delivering the priorities of the British people, not internal fights within the Conservative Party and all of the excitement that we saw last year.
It will be interesting, though, Jerry, won't it, to see who turns up at the Carlton Club? It'd be quite a vivid sign of the people who...
I can tell you now, I can just lift the stone and see who's crawling underneath it. You'll have Jacob Rees-Mogg, man of the people, great intellect, Dean Doris. They'll all be there, and they'll all be crying in their beer, oh gosh, we've got to have him back. He's the only person who can save us all.
Let's write down who you reckon will be pictured at the Carlton Club. So you've got Jacob Rees-Mogg, right? Nadine Dorries, surely.
Nadine Doris.
Pretty Patel, definitely.
Who might be there? Connor Burns.
Connor Burns, right? Okay. What we'll do is Nadine Dorries, Right, what we'll do is we'll play Boris Johnson bingo tomorrow, OK? And when the pictures come out, we'll see who was there and who wasn't. But look, thank you very much, both of you, I must say. But yeah, I think I do agree as well with what you were saying, which is that, you know, the idea of Boris is a nice thing. But I just think at this moment in time, the cadence will probably be a bit off. Jerry Hayes, criminal barrister and former Conservative MP, and Albie Amankona as well, co-founder, Conservative Against Racism for Equality. Good stuff. Right now, loads of you, yes, getting in touch with another top story for us today. We've been talking a bit about Prince Harry. Well, a lot. I'm hoping this is the end of it now, because the book's out. For goodness sake, the book is out. It's done. You can buy a copy. It got leaked in Spain. We all know what's in it now, and I'm sick and tired of it. But anyway, Lorraine says, I acknowledge that Harry suffered severe trauma when his mother died. The memory and pain does not leave, but one learns to live with it and make a life. Now, I am glad that you've emailed this in, Lorraine. Thank you very much. I was having a chat with someone very close to me the other day, and it's a bit uncomfortable to say, isn't it? Because it's desperately sad, and incredibly traumatic, undeniably traumatic what happened to Diana. At some point, do you have to try to get over it? And he doesn't appear to have got over it, does he, at all? And is that shaping the rest of his life? Because for all of this stuff which he keeps bringing up about, a clairvoyant told him that Diana said to her that he's living the life that she wanted. Would she really want him to be this miserable? He doesn't look happy, does he? The spark has gone from Harry. But anyway, there we go. Alison says, spare rearranged. Oh, can spell reaps. He will reap what he sows, that's for sure. I see what you've done there. Bit of wordplay. Philip says, if Prince Harry passed me in the street, I'd ask him if he managed to fix his necklace. And Michael says, I'm sick and tired of all the hate for Prince Harry by the media. I've not heard anything he said that deserves the hate that he's spewing out. The palace are refusing to comment. I wonder why. Well, yeah, I suppose they have the old, you know, what is it? Don't complain, never explain, or something. Prince Harry himself said that's a bit of a myth. Right, we're moving on, people. Thank goodness for that. Today, Labour has announced they would seek to end repeat work capability assessments for those who are disabled or ill. Earlier, the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Jonathan Ashworth, unveiled his plans to get more people back into work if they are fit to do so. He said it's all part of a bid to make better use of existing resources. Olivia, who's Olivia Utley, of course, our political reporter. Can you make this interesting for me?
Well, yes, I'll give it a go.
All right, thank you. God, sorry, I nearly fell asleep reading that.
The workplace capability assessments, just to get it out of the way, what the substance of the policy plan is basically if you're on benefits and disabled benefits and then you go into work, if that job doesn't work out for any reason and you want to go back onto benefits, you have to complete a really long, arduous form. And essentially, Labour thinks that it's disincentivising people to get a job because they're worried that if it doesn't work out, they won't be able to get their benefits back. Right. So basically, what Ashworth wants to do is tweak lots of little policies like that to make them more workable. As huge welfare reform strategies go, it seems pretty unambitious in scope.
He's saving on form filling.
Saving on form filling was one of the highlights. Another of the highlights was that he's not going to scrap universal credit, which is obviously a Tory policy. He'd just sort of tinker around the edges of it. So in terms of substance, it really was... You say boring, I say perhaps a little unambitious in scope. But in terms of language, it was quite interesting because he just seemed determined at every opportunity to show that Labour under Starmer would be capable of sort of seizing the centre ground. On strikes, he didn't weigh in behind the unions, which was quite interesting. He just talked about the workability of the Conservatives' anti-strike legislation, saying that it wouldn't work. But again, he didn't come down on one side or the other. He kept talking about economic competency and seemed determined to... take that badge away from the Conservatives.
This is the benefit they've got, isn't it, now? Because by virtue of how long the Conservatives have been in government, everything can be pinned on them, realistically. Pretty much everything can be pinned on them. So it's all their fault. You know, if we are now looking in a situation where our public services are in a bit of a mess, the economy's in a bit of a mess, yeah, OK, the Tories will point to the pandemic, they'll point to Ukraine. But Labour now can stand there and go, well, it's in a mess. You're now trying to fix your own mess, aren't you? Which is, you know, not exactly a vote winner. I will fix my own mess, people.
Exactly, and that seems to be Labour's strategy so far heading into the next election. Sit tight and watch the Tories implode themselves, because on the detail, Ashworth was actually pretty light.
Well, yeah, it's yet another... I'm a bit sick of this, by the way, can I just say, of yet again in politics, It's like, OK, the announcement is that there's not really an announcement. And it's just, I mean, when we're talking about the fact... Also, forgive me, if you are the type of person, disability or otherwise, who might be put off getting a job because if you lose that job, you might have to fill in a long form to get back on benefits. Forgive me, but I don't think you're maybe the kind of person who's going to work that hard anyway in the job. But I could be wrong. Olivia, thank you very much. Olivia Utley there, our political reporter, who did manage to make that interesting. There you go. See, form filling done right. With me now is charity founder and author. It's Nick Buckley, MBE. Nick, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. What do you make as a charity founder and, of course, author of note about Labour's welfare plan?
It has one or two good points in it. Not fantastic points, not changing the whole system points, but all these policies have some good points. So they're right in one way, as in, if what's stopping you getting off your backside and getting a job is the fear that you'll lose all your benefits if it doesn't work out, and if that's stopping you, and the government doesn't have the backbone to force you to get a job, well, let's remove that barrier. And then you may take a chance and you may get a job, which then improves your life. So I'm happy for removing barriers. But what we never address is the root cause of all this. And the root cause is our welfare system, instead of being a safety net, has become a hammock. And it's become a destination of choice. It was always meant to be a safety net.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a problem. And that is something that Labour were criticised for under the last Labour government. I do find it interesting that Labour keep harking back now. Whenever you ask them about the strikes, they go, well, we never really had any strikes. We never had any strikes. And so that was absolutely ages ago. It was ages ago. The world has moved on. The world has changed. It is not the same place now. And so I don't think they can keep using that as an example. But when it comes to this, the last time that Labour were in government, they were saying, well, you know, maybe the benefit system, it lent itself to people scrounging, OK, or on the take, or that old idea of someone there with, you know, 3 kids in a council flat, chain smoking and drinking special brie the whole time. It was probably a bit unfair, but that was one of the tropes that came out of it. Labour looking to move away from that this time, but in your views, they might still be looking to make the benefit system too generous. What do you think?
I think every government since the Second World War has made the benefit system too beneficial. Absolutely every one of them. As a society, if we keep rewarding poor choices and poor behaviour, then we shouldn't be surprised when people conduct poor behaviour and make poor choices. And that's what we keep doing. The state seems to want to be our parents. They seem to want to step in and say, oh, we don't like you doing that. You're making bad decisions. So therefore, we're going to wrap our arms around you and make it as comfortable as possible. As humans, sometimes we need to fail and we need to feel the pain of failure so we can get back on our feet and we can make a better situation of it. Let me give you a personal example. So I grew up on benefits. I remember every Monday morning queuing up in school at the admin office waiting to be given my 5 free dinner tickets for the week. And there'd be 50 of us queuing up in a line every break on a Monday morning. People would say that was humiliating because everybody knew who the poor kids was in my school. But while I was studying that line, I didn't feel embarrassed because I knew my family had no money and we were grateful for the help we got. But while I was studying that line, I was saying to myself, my child ain't going to be studying this line. I'll tell you that for nothing. But then what we did so many years later is we created a new system to give kids free meals at school without anybody knowing. So a kid like me today isn't stood in that line going, my child won't be stood here.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic example because you're absolutely right. It could go one of two ways, couldn't it? It could become very self-pitying and it could become, oh, it was humiliating and I always used to hate standing in that line. Or it could go exactly the way that it's gone with you, which is I'm going to do my damn best to make sure that my kid is never in this particular line. I'm going to put my shoulders still. And I would hope that the vast majority of people are like you, really. But Nick, thank you very much. Nick Buckley there, charity founder and author, reacting to Labour's welfare plan. Anyway, we're moving on now. I'm going into the inbox for emails because we did, and we're going to be returning to this shortly in the next hour. And I am actually covering for Mark Stein this evening, so 8 till 9. And at about 8 o'clock, we're going to be covering this story again because the town council, parish council meeting will have just finished. It's the one that Paul Hawkins brought to you earlier on. Massive controversy taking place in a town called Cretan. It's in Northamptonshire. 500 people live in that. It's a village, actually, not really a town, it's a village. 500 people live in that village. And there are plans to plonk 400 asylum seekers in that village. Your views on this controversy now that has emerged. We're going to be covering this as and when. It's a 17th century country manor hotel in a small village, by the way. Have a look at that if you're looking on TV. To be honest with you, it looks exactly how it sounds. Local MP Chris Heaton-Harris, as well as North West Hamptonshire Council, they've been up in arms about it. Northamptonshire, sorry. Anyway, Julie says, why not let it be used for our own people needing a respite between hospital and home? It will help with NHS and we'll be able to help out our own. The government has already said they will help out with funds for those needing help. It shouldn't go to the migrants. Those Julie's views. Elaine says, I live in Newquay and we have a hotel full of migrants on the seafront, which I totally disagree with. We've not only got homeless people here in my town, but families that have no home of their own because there is no affordable housing. Why are the local councils not meeting the needs of locals first? Now, I want to just pick up on something you said there, because I completely get what you're saying, Elaine. But all too often, and there's been cases like this up and down the country, the Home Office will say I think the wording of what they say is normally quite tricky, because what they say is, we at the earliest opportunity, we involve the local councils. But all too often, from what I can see in various different areas, stories like this I've covered before, that earliest opportunity is after they've already struck a deal with a particular hotel chain or an individual hotel, everything's in place. And sometimes the migrants are on the way. So it's like they're in a coach, pretty much, and then they tell the local area, which is why even Conservative-run councils, frankly, especially Conservative-run councils, are up in arms about this, because they have to find the money. The Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, for example, has had to find £1 million this year just for child migrants alone. That would equate to an average increase of 1.5% on your council tax every single year. And, of course, the people don't get a vote on this. They don't get a vote on it, do they? But there we go. John says, I would put migrants in every posh Tory village so all the MPs know how it changes your town or city beyond recognition with segregated groups of people. They'll get a taste of their own medicine and maybe then we'll do something about the illegal immigrants. I actually would be tempted to go the other way, John. I don't disagree with your sentiment there. I would lob them all in. Well, there's no point in putting them in seats run by Lib Dems because there's only a few of them, isn't there? But I would put them in seats where people have MPs or a lot of posh, leafy parts of London where there's a lot of these, refugees welcome brigade. I would put a lot of them there just to see how they feel about the upping in the council tax and the changing to the area, etc., and see what they make of that. We're going to be picking this up shortly because Paul Hawkins is at the scene for us there. He's going to be attending a parish council meeting. We'll be getting the reaction from outside the parish council meeting, hopefully speaking to some residents as well about all of that. But, yeah, how would you feel if you lived in a small village, 500 of you, and there was plans by the Home Office to plonk, at the taxpayers' expense, of course, 400 asylum seekers in that village with nothing to do all day? Nothing to do all day. There's just nothing, it's just fields. Anyway, don't go away because we've got loads coming up in the next hour. I will be crossing to that Northamptonshire village. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Keep your views coming in. I've got your weather.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. It's not as cold out there today, but it's not a pleasant day, dull and wet in many areas. That rain quite heavy in some spots, and we do have a number of Met Office yellow warnings in place. Low pressure is responsible. These weather fronts draped across the country. Plenty of isobars on the chart as well. It is blustery, it is cloudy, it is damp, and for some, that rain especially heavy over southwest Scotland, northwest England, and at times parts of Wales. I say we do have a number of Met Office yellow rainfall warnings in place. Bit of snow on the Scottish mountains. That's not lasting too long as the warmer air pushes in here. The rain easing somewhat now over central and eastern areas, but staying quite grey and damp, staying blustery. But it is mild, temperatures in double digits, even into the teens in some spots. A windy evening with further rain for Wales, and it gets very windy overnight across northern Scotland. We have another Met Office yellow warning in place here for the strength of the wind. Rain crosses England and Wales, something a bit drier then arrives through the night with clearer spells. Doesn't turn too chilly though because of the strength of the wind. That'll actually help to keep temperatures several degrees above freezing for most of us. And it'll bring some sunshine first thing on Wednesday morning, but then the showers will get going. Plenty of showers in the west throughout the morning. Much of the east will have a dry morning, I suspect, but the showers will move in here as we go through the day. Heavy showers blown along by a stiff and gusty wind, some snow again over the Scottish mountains. Temperature-wise, dropping down, so back closer to average, feeling a lot colder because of the strength of the wind and certainly when the heavy showers come along, of which there will still be plenty through tomorrow evening. May turn drier for a time, but then look at this, another area of rain coming in, potentially causing some further issues because the ground is so wet at the moment. That'll bring a spell of rain across the country on Thursday, blustery on Friday, but perhaps a little drier, turning a bit colder into the weekend.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deems & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's bang on 5 o'clock. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up in this hour, within the last few moments, it's been revealed the Duke of Sussex's autobiography is the fastest-selling non-fiction book ever, recording figures of 400,000 copies so far across hardback, ebook and audio formats on its first day of publication. That is according to the publisher. Anyway, there we go. But the lack of queues around the block or Black Friday-style scenes suggest otherwise. Also, GB News has spotted some inaccuracies in accounts of certain events that the Duke recalls. Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, will reveal all about the book, that is, not something else. It's a very different show. Also this hour, strikes could well be the thing of the past. New laws are being proposed to block the never-ending cycle of strike action by requiring minimal service levels maintained in the public sector. The big question is whether or not some people should lose their right to strike based on what job they do. I'm inclined to say yes, I think they should. For example, if that job involves saving people's lives. Plus, the village with just 500 residents, where the government wants to house 400 asylum seekers. You go figure, do the math. People there are not happy with the plan. I'm not surprised. We'll get the latest ahead of a council meeting being held tonight. We're going to be getting the reaction straight off the back of that council meeting as well later on this evening. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I want to know two things. Firstly, would you oppose a hotel like that in your area? So if you were in a village of 500 people, would you oppose a hotel, say 400 asylum seekers? Why would you oppose it? gbviews@gbnews.uk. And why not? What would you say if you walked past Prince Harry in the street? His book's out today, the fastest selling work of non-fiction ever. Now, though, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you, and hello to you. Our top story today, the RMT's General Secretary Mick Lynch has called the government's new anti-strike bill an attack on human rights. The legislation would require levels of service from ambulance staff, firefighters and railway workers during industrial action. It comes amid a wave of industrial action across the public sector in disputes over pay. The Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, says the legislation is necessary to protect the public.
To deny and to vote against legislation that brings in minimum safety levels to help our constituents is to attack their security and their welfare.
Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner says the system was failing before the strikes began.
Is my constituent Spina, who waited over an hour for an ambulance, who died waiting for an ambulance, and that was not on a strike day. That is because of the disastrous chaos we have in the system under this Conservative government. Is my constituent Spina, who waited over an hour for an ambulance, who died waiting for an ambulance, and that was not on a strike day. That is because of the disastrous chaos we have in the system under this Conservative government.
Our apologies, our computer system fired that clip twice. But to carry on with that story, ambulance workers in England and Wales are set to go on strike tomorrow after talks with the government failed to reach a resolution. It's the first industrial action within the health sector this year, with nurses in England also set to walk out later this month. The Health Secretary has described the action as unhelpful, but insisted he is working with trade unions. Steve Barclay also said the government isn't looking to backdate a pay increase for NHS workers.
We don't think it would be appropriate to go back to last April, to retrospectively go back all those months in terms of what has already happened this year. We had a process that looked at the issues in the round, but at the same time we want to listen to the trade unions, we want to engage with them constructively, we want to get the right evidence into the pay review body next year, and of course they made further representations in terms of this year, notwithstanding that we're more than 3/4 of the way through the year, and it is right that we listen to those concerns.
Well, news of more strike action now, this time in Scotland, where teachers in schools across the country are on the first of their two-day strike after failing to reach an agreement over pay with the Scottish Government. The current offer would see most staff in classrooms receive a 5% pay rise, but unions are demanding a 10% increase. Primary school teachers will walk out today. Staff at secondary schools are walking out tomorrow. Meanwhile, Labour has promised a package of welfare reforms under their leadership bid to help people return to work. Under the plan, the claimants will try paid work. If that doesn't work out within a year, they can go back on benefits. The Labour Party also plans a further reform of employment support for the over 50s. The Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Jonathan Ashwood, claims the reforms will help disabled people or those on sickness benefits find work.
What I'm proposing today are new measures, new reforms, new thinking to support people who say they want to return to work. Now, in this country, we've got 1 million people looking for work who want a job, and we've got hundreds of thousands of people who are currently designated as long-term sick, but say they would want to work if given the right support.
Well, in breaking news that you are hearing at the top of this hour, Prince Harry's memoir Spare has officially become the fastest-selling non-fiction book ever, with 400,000 copies sold on launch day alone. His version of some events has been thrown into doubt. In the book, though, the Duke of Sussex writes he heard about the death of his great-grandmother, the Queen Mother, in a phone call whilst he was at Eton. She died in March 2002, but GB News has uncovered photographic evidence which shows the Prince returning from a skiing trip to Switzerland with his father and brother at the time. Representatives of the Duke have been contacted for comment. Now, Amazon plans to shut down 3 UK warehouses, which could impact more than 1,000 jobs. The company launched consultations in sites at Hemel Hempstead, Doncaster and Gourock. It's understood workers will be offered roles at other Amazon locations. The company's also revealed plans for 2 major centres in the West Midlands and the North East, which could create 2,500 jobs over the next 3 years. In the United States, a teacher has been hailed a hero after managing to get pupils out of a classroom after being shot by a 6-year-old boy. 25-year-old Abigail Zverner was shot by one of her pupils at Richneck Elementary School in Virginia last week. Police say the boy fired one shot which hit her hand and her chest, but the teacher still managed to get the kids out of the classroom. She's in hospital in a stable condition. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
OK, I've got an action-packed final hour for you here. Breaking news to kickstart the hour, though. Harry's memoir has finally landed. Not on the bonfire, unfortunately. British bookshelves, yes, that's where it is. After a week of leaks and speculation, and get this, it's become the fastest-selling non-fiction book ever. Although, anyway, I won't say that, he'll sue me. Recording figures of 4,000 copies so far across hardback, e-book and audio formats on its first day of publication. That's according to publishers. Some people even queued up to get their hands on a copy at midnight last night and read all the revelations about the Duke of Sussex's life and subsequent escape, where he found freedom, of course, in the United States, with just his trust fund to fall back on. And this afternoon, our royal correspondent Cameron Walker has unveiled Harry's ability to accurately recall events has been called into serious doubt. So questions of credibility here from Harry. A significant Queen Mother error in the book. And Cameron Walker joins me now. Cameron, take it away.
Yes, I mean, first of all, just let's go back to the point that the Duke of Sussex's book has sold more than 400,000 copies so far across hardback, ebook and audio formats, according to the publisher. Pretty significant. We've been talking all day, haven't we, about the lack of queues coming from the bookshops. But according to these figures, it is the fastest-selling non-fiction book. And as far as the publisher knows, the only other books to have sold more in their first day of those starring the other Harry. Any guess?
Harry Potter.
Correct.
It's got to be Harry Potter. Yes, yes. From the wonderful creative mind of J.K. Rowling, of course. OK, all right. So it has been flying off the shelves. I think the e-book numbers, no doubt, though, will have helped. I think. And potentially as well, audiobook. Apparently he reads it himself, doesn't he? I'm quite keen to get the audiobook just to listen to him droning on a bit.
I've got the audiobook on my phone and I've been listening all day, Patrick, having Prince Harry in my ears. Well, do you know, what strikes me, he's actually quite a good voice actor because he imitates a few of the quotes and he gives it conviction. And he imitates an Australian accent when he's talking about one of his Australian friends who he spent time on his gap year with in the outback. And it was pretty good, actually, pretty skilled.
Oh, there you go. Well, then maybe he can do the voiceover work that he was trying to tout Meghan for.
It must be the Hollywood rubbing off on him.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have, however, found what appears to be an inconsistency and it calls into question the whole thing.
Yes, well, so it appears there is an inconsistency with Prince Harry's version of events when it comes to how he found out about his great-grandmother, the Queen Mother's death in 2002.
The kind of thing you'd remember normally, with crystal clear vision, the kind of thing, you know, you'd remember how a relative died, how you were told of it. You'd think that's something that would be etched into your mental retina.
You would think it's a pretty significant life event, and you're right, you'd think, many people would say that you'd remember it, but this is what Prince Harry has written in his memoir. So he says, at Eton, while studying, I took the call. I wish I could remember whose voice it was at the other end, a courtier's, I believe. I recalled that it was just before Easter, the weather was bright and warm, light slanting through my window, filled with vivid colours. Your Royal Highness, the Queen Mother, has died. Right. Now, from looking at news reports from that time, it would suggest that Prince Harry, along with his brother and father, were away skiing at the time in Switzerland. The Queen Mother also died the day before Easter Sunday. I think it's called Holy Saturday. Right. which would suggest that schools would be shut, because, of course, it's the Easter holidays. I also spoke to a former royal correspondent who was covering the official photo call with William, Harry and Charles in Switzerland. It's the agreements they had with the press. They would pose for photographs, the press would then fly back to England, and they would be left alone to get on with their ski trip in private. So the royal correspondent who I spoke to said the phone call came through to her, to the person, that the Queen Mother was gravely ill when she landed back in England. Now, GB News has also uncovered a photograph from that time which appears to show Prince Charles, Prince William and Prince Harry having stepped off the plane back in the UK to enter a car immediately following that ski trip. This photo is dated 31st of March 2002.
Right, which would appear to suggest, that perhaps Prince Harry's recollection was, of course, mistaken. And I think the wider point there is, well, hang on a minute, what other recollections may well not necessarily stand up to scrutiny? He's dished out rather a lot here, hasn't he? He's dished out a lot of things about Camilla, for example, you know, the old Nazi uniform stuff. Interesting as well, he said, I read a quote from him, he said that he felt as though he had to talk about the 25 Taliban fighters that he's killed because he wanted to get it off his chest. But then a lot of people think, well, hang on a minute, whilst that might be great for you, that might also now put a target on your family, for example.
Yeah, he's done that. He's done an interview with People magazine in the United States, another interview that's been announced today, where he said he had to put a number on the number of Taliban he killed for his own mental sake. However, the counter-argument to that, from speaking to ex-service personnel and several politicians have also come out and said that it does potentially cause a security risk. It puts a target on his back, not only himself, but his family. That of the Invictus Games being held in Dusseldorf in the autumn, which is Prince Harry's big veteran rehabilitation Olympic-like competition. So it is a real worry and concern for some people that Prince Harry has been quite so open in his book, and some are branding it distasteful.
Well, I agree completely. And the thing is that there are enough lunatics out there, you know, radicalised, etc., without someone who's a member of the royal family, one way or the other, helping, I would argue, maybe to feed into their narrative of, you know, this is for Prince Harry, that kind of stuff. And I just don't think we need that at all. I think the public would be, well, frankly, quite up in arms, obviously, if somebody ever did do anything citing what Prince Harry had said. But hopefully we never have to find that out. Cameron, thank you very much. Cameron Walker there, our royal reporter, bringing you bang up to date with Prince Harry's book. Let's speak now to our national reporter, Ellie Costello, who's outside one of the biggest bookshops in London. Now, Ellie, you are still there. We've quite literally given you the long stand today, haven't we? We said, stand there, and it just looks like Prince Harry is just looming over you from behind there. And, we were saying it was quite quiet, but apparently it's the fastest-selling work of non-fiction.
Yes, it's pretty incredible, isn't it? It felt like a bit of an anti-climax this morning. Here before 8 o'clock, there were 40 or 50 journalists crowded outside Waterstones in Piccadilly, waiting for those long queues of people desperate to get their hands on a copy of Spare, the autobiography by Prince Harry. There was only one customer in the queue, Patrick. It was all rather embarrassing for all of us journalists that had turned up at that time. Her name was Caroline Lennon, and I asked her how she felt about being the only person in the queue outside of this bookshop today.
Didn't expect me to be on my own. I thought there'd be a long queue. I'm quite surprised, to be honest with you. I thought there'd be a lot more people. I'm saddened about that, to be honest.
And what made you want to buy the books? There's been so many leaks, hasn't there? There's been so much in the press.
I don't know. I just want to read about him. I've not turned up here to be the first in the queue to be, hey, I've done it. No, I was hoping there'd be a lot more people to share my, comments with, and there's no one to talk to.
And what's your first impression of the book?
Well, I like the picture, to be honest. I thought the picture's quite nice. It's well done. And I've heard the interviews. I can't wait for the audio book. I've bought that already, and I can't wait to read about his family.
I absolutely love that little interview there. Ellie, I mean, so has it got busier at all where you are? Are the owners of the shop happy or a bit disappointed, maybe? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think it's safe to say that there are plenty of spare copies. of Spare going on in this bookshop here. Plenty more still on sale. So if you are close to the local area, this is the place to come if you want a copy of Spare. Safe to say that there hasn't been a huge amount of footfall in Waterstones here in Piccadilly. But Patrick, I think that says more about the way that our shopping habits have changed more than the popularity of this book. We've just heard from Penguin Random House, those are the publishers of Prince Harry's autobiography Spare. They say it's the fastest selling non-fiction book ever. 400,000 copies, that's across hardback, ebook and audio, have been sold today so far. So the books are selling, perhaps not in the traditional sense though.
No, absolutely. There you go. Thank you very, very much. I think you're absolutely spot on. People buy these things online now, don't they? They know what we're accusing them of bookstores, as has been evidenced. Ellie, thank you very much. Ellie Costello there, outside a Waterstones, just to reveal, yes, well, despite the fact that there was, bless her, just one woman in a queue there, apparently it is the fastest-selling work of non-fiction of all time, which is nothing to be sniffed at. Anyway, after Harry's claims, chances of a family reunion may be even more unlikely, as his family fear that any conversations will be shared with the press. Obviously, why on earth now would you invite Harry in? Before you know it, all of a sudden, that private conversation you had on Netflix, or he's written another book about it. Apparently, by the way, the advance for Penguin Random House was 17 million quid, which is, oh, look, obviously it's an extortionate amount of money, but to irreparably, or otherwise, but irreparably, in my view, damage your relationship with your family and potentially turn an entire nation against you. I think it's not that much money, is it? Anyway, I want to know, has Harry done irreparable damage? I'm joined by Royal Broadcasters Helena Chard and Nicholas Owen to discuss this. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Ladies first. Helena, I will start with you. Has Harry in any way damaged the actual fabric of the monarchy by releasing this book, do you think?
Do you know, Patrick, this book, I haven't read the whole book, but some of the topics in it are completely underwhelming. Really, it's incredible. The royal family has been through a lot over the years, and I personally think, although I can see there's a little bit of damage, I think it will just move on. But obviously, as far as reconciliation is, I just cannot see that happening easily. Obviously, there'd have to be an NDA, and it would be this nonsense about reconciliation behind the doors. So with family is nonsense. And it's said without irony as well. I tell you what, I do think personally it has done damage. Hopefully it will move on. I feel he's being very disparaging about Camilla, who obviously is very important to King Charles, and I think it's not on at all. I mean, it's the American side of things, you know.
I do get that. I do get that. Now, Nicholas, you know as well, you both know, I've not exactly been particularly glowing about Prince Harry. The one thing I will say about the Camilla thing is, if it was my dad and I'd known that he'd been having an affair with this woman and that had potentially in some way, not led to my mother's demise, but, not exactly improved matters, I think I'd be inclined to not particularly like the woman who's been having an affair with him. Nicholas, do you think he's all right when it comes to the Camilla stuff?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. And after all, it takes a lot less awful things to happen for stepchildren to have to adjust to somebody else coming into the family and not liking it. But here's the thing that I think is lacking. It's all very well for Harry to say, I was villainous. I think the word villain has been used somewhere to refer to Camilla. But he doesn't go on to say, but in the end, things worked out well. I mean, when I go through this book, what a tedious business it is having to do that. I don't sense that he somehow not just come to terms with it, but actually accepted what the rest of the population, almost every single person has accepted, is that the king has married the woman that he has loved all those years, and they are now jolly happy, and other things happened in the past. How sad, but they are in the past. Let's get on. Let's go forward.
Yes, indeed. Well, talking of moving forward, Helena, do you think if you had to put money on it, there's any chance of Harry being at the coronation?
I feel not at this stage. I feel that the royal family are obviously horrified, as am I and lots of people. There would have to be, I think, a lot more in place for that to happen. There is damage, and I just, we want to celebrate. We're looking forward to the coronation. This is a really special time. The accession and 4 months of the coronation. We we don't want this negativity. It's madness, isn't it? I think it's going to blow over.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, his desperate clutch for relevance, Nicholas, I mean, he's going to continue to try to do this. Apparently, there's rumours of Meghan having a book in the pipeline as well. Nicholas, do you think if Prince Harry... I've been asking people, I'll go to the inbox shortly, actually, but do you think if he walked down the street in this country now, he would actually get booed?
Well, it's hard to... I don't know. It depends on the circumstances, rather, doesn't it? I mean, he's not going to walk down the street without being accompanied by a lot of other people. Especially after what he said about what he did in Afghanistan, he's going to have to be jolly well guarded. So there's always going to be people do a bit of that. I agree with you. But listen, the best thing, let's look at this, try and some positive light on this, would be for the King, for his father, to invite him to the coronation and Harry to politely decline. I think everybody would feel a lot happier. But the trouble is, we're talking months away here, Patrick, aren't we? We're talking, 5 months away. So goodness knows what's going to happen. There's more appearances. There's Harry's going to be on The Late Show in America, where it sounds to me they're going to take the mickey out of him big time. But that's not terribly good for the monarchy, actually, to be honest, isn't it? He's also appearing on the cover and a big story in People magazine in America, all glossed up and so. And this is just the stuff. This ain't going to go away. There's a lot still to come. A lot still to come.
Well, yes, but I wonder whether or not it's going to backfire on him, actually, because I was reading with some interesting reports from people who claim to be former friends of Harry and were saying, well, the amount of stuff that we've made go away on him, or the amount of times that we have not revealed something that we could have been, that would have been very dangerous for Harry, especially in his more formative years. I just wonder if they're going to go, right, enough's enough now. I'm going to tell them all about the time that he... Anyway, right, thank you very much, both of you. I'm moving on. Helena Child there and Nicholas Owen as well. Earlier today, the government outlined a new bill which aims to maintain minimum service levels in the public sector during walkouts. If passed, it'll force some trade union members to continue working on strike days. In a cabinet meeting at the Commons, the business secretary explained how a denial of the bill would be an attack on the public. Yesterday, Health Secretary Steve Barclay met with trade union officials in a bid to broker the solution, describing the talks as productive. We caught up with him in the last hour, and this is what he had to say.
Well, we had a productive discussion with the trade unions yesterday. The key focus of the meeting was to look at next year's pay review body and the evidence that we submit to that. We want to work constructively with the unions in terms of the evidence that is submitted there, and obviously building on what has come out from the OBR and what is affordable to the wider economy. But of course, as part of that meeting, we also listened to the trade unions in terms of their concerns in respect of this year. That's part of a wider discussion that is happening across government, where other departments, other secretaries of state are meeting with their trade unions. And of course, I will take those messages back from the health unions in terms of my discussions with the Chancellor.
OK, good stuff. Right, well, here to pick the bones out of that is the wonderful political commentator Emma Webb, who joins me now. Emma, great to have you on the show. Happy New Year, if we're still saying that. I don't know if we are, but anyway, I've just said it. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Easter. Do some people lose the right to strike based on what job they do?
Look, I think the way that this is being portrayed as an anti-strike bill is actually extremely misleading. Grant Shapps has been very clear that this is about the minimum amount of service that you can have while still maintaining safety. So absolutely, if you work in a sector where your ability to do your job is the difference between life or death, say if you're an ambulance driver, as one example, it shouldn't be the case, as Grant Shapps pointed out, that as we saw in the recent ambulance strikes, that you end up with a postcode lottery. So if you live in an area where there are lots of ambulance workers, paramedics striking, then if you have a heart attack or if you have a stroke, then you might not have anybody to come to your rescue. Whereas if you live in an area where those workers aren't striking, then you would have an entirely different service. So this is about keeping people safe. And I think Grant Shapps has made a very good point in Parliament, which is that the International Labour Organization, which the TUC is actually signed up to, actually recognises that having this safety net, this minimum service level, is actually a proportionate response to trying to balance workers' rights to strike with the safety of the public.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, isn't it? Because obviously there is a lot when it comes to free speech, a lot when it comes to arguably human rights, workers' rights, of course, but also at the same time, the clue's in the name, isn't it, Emma? It's public service, public services. And I can't help but feel as though the public have been taken for granted by the very people who are supposed to serve them.
Yeah, if you go into a job as a nurse or as a doctor, particularly as a doctor, you sign up to you make the Hippocratic oath that you will do no harm when you go into that career. If you choose to take up a career where you're helping to save people's lives, then of course you have a certain duty to the public that other individuals don't have. And that's not to say that these people don't have the right to withdraw their labour. And this is a point that Grant Shapps has emphasised. This is about creating a proportionate response, which is similar to what other European countries actually do, just to ensure that there is a minimum level of service. And the Conservative Party had already discussed doing this in their 2019 manifesto when it comes to critical infrastructure like the trains, the railways. But obviously, if we have a situation where the nurses, when they decided to strike, they came to an agreement to meet some minimum level of service to try and minimise the amount of harm done to patients as a result of that strike action.
Yeah.
We should have that as a standard across the board, and that's all that this legislation seeks to do.
Fair enough. Emma, thank you very much. As ever, Emma Webb there, political commentator. Right, OK, quickly, just delving into the inbox because this tees up what I'm going to be talking about next. Massive story this for you all, of course, because it's going to be happening in a town or village near you, no doubt. We've got 500 people who live in a village called Cretan. The Home Office wants to put 400 asylum seekers in a hotel in that village. Alison's been on. The illegal migrant situation angers me so much, Patrick. These hotels are not obliged to house illegal immigrants. The residents of this small village should show their anger and how upset they are. And in fact, they're going to do just that. And we're going to be covering it live. There's a parish council meeting. We're going to get reaction from it very shortly. I am going live to this particular area now with Paul Hawkins. He's our national reporter. He's at the scene to give a view of public sentiment. It'll be happening in a town or a village near you. I'll be back in a tick.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 5:30 and these are your latest GB News headlines. The government has introduced new legislation requiring some unions to ensure a minimum service level during strike action and is confident it'll be passed this year. The new anti-strike bill has, though, received criticism from union bosses, with the RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch calling it an attack on human rights. And the TUC is planning to hold a national Protect the Right to Strike Day on the 1st of February. Business Secretary Grant Shapps says the legislation is necessary to protect the public.
To deny and to vote against legislation that brings in minimum safety levels to help our constituents is to attack their security and their welfare.
Meanwhile, ambulance workers in England and Wales are set to go out on strike tomorrow after talks with the government over pay failed to reach a resolution. It's the first industrial action this year, with nurses also set to walk out later this month in England. The Health Secretary's described the action as unhelpful, but insisted he is working with trade unions. And teachers in Scotland are on the first of their two-day strike today after failing to reach agreement over pay with the Scottish Government. The current offer on the table would see most staff in classrooms receive a 5% pay rise, but unions are demanding a 10% increase. Primary school teachers have walked off today and staff at secondary schools will walk out tomorrow. As you've been hearing, Prince Harry's memoir Spare has become the fastest-selling non-fiction book ever, with 400,000 copies sold on launch day alone. GB News has been uncovering some inconsistencies in the book, however, the Duke of Sussex writing that he heard about the death of his great-grandmother, for example, in a phone call whilst at Eton. But photographic evidence shows the Prince returning from a skiing trip to Switzerland with his father at the time. Representatives of the Duke have been contacted for comment. That's it. Those are your headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You are with GB News, the People's Channel. Don't go anywhere. We're back in just a tick.
OK, yes, on to probably the most controversial story of the day, which has emerged over the Home Office plan to house up to 400 asylum seekers in a hotel next to a West Northamptonshire village. And the reason why it's controversial, apart from all of it, arguably, is that there's only 500 people in that village. The Highgate House Hotel, a former 17th century country manor, is being suggested to provide hotel accommodation for asylum seekers, which currently costs the UK taxpayer, depends who you listen to on this, but around £5.6 million a day. Some say as much as £7 if you factor in food costs, etc. It's a lot of money. Anyway, Cabinet member and local MP for the area, Chris Heaton-Harris, described the choice of location as, quote, dreadful. Well, we're going to be sticking to this story like glue because our very own Paul Hawkins, GB News' national reporter, joins us now from the village of Cretan in West Northamptonshire. Paul, great. Last time I spoke to you, you were outside the hotel. I just think you probably still are you? What's going on where you are?
Yeah, we are still outside the hotel, Patrick. We're a 10-minute walk, stone's throw from the tiny village of Cretan, which, as you say, only has 500 people living in it. It's about 9 miles north of Northampton. And what they learned last month was that the Home Office intends to requisition this hotel, Highgate House Manor, which was a hotel. It closed a couple of years ago because the family-run business was having trouble with COVID. They were having trouble making money, so it's been sold to another group. And as the parish council understands it, as West Northamptonshire County Council understand it, the hotel is to be requisitioned by the Home Office maybe by the end of this month, and they intend to put 400 asylum seekers into this 17th century manor house, which has 84 ensuite bedrooms. It has a conference room. It's been used in the past for hotels, for conferences. It's got 6 acres of land and a gym. And simply put, the Home Office are obviously requisitioning these types of accommodation because the waiting list, the backlog, is now 140,000 asylum seekers waiting to have their applications processed. When we look at the figures, in 2021 there was only 75,000. If you go to 2012, it was around 20,000. So the numbers of those waiting to have their asylum application processed has increased enormously, and the waiting time to get their application processed has increased from 6 months in 2014 to now 15 months. On average, it takes 15 months to get your application for asylum processed, and of course the numbers that are applying are increasing. Of course, with those travelling across the Channel, those numbers have soared as well. So villages like this, like Cretan, are objecting to these volumes of people being placed in the hotel. They're simply saying, look, it's unsuitable, as Chris Heaton-Harris put it. The Home Office has said that it does not comment on operational arrangements for individual sites used for asylum accommodation. They do engage with local authorities as early as possible whenever sites are used for asylum accommodation, and work to ensure arrangements are safe for hotel residents and local people. We do know that Chris Eaton-Harris set up a consultation on his website, and we know from the parish council that at least 350 responses have been filed on that website. They were passed to the Home Office, and the Home Office is now considering that response. Simply put, the parish council want to know, look, what kind of decision-making process did you undertake in choosing what we consider to be an unsuitable hotel in an unsuitable location?
Yeah, well, exactly that, and it could actually be very revelatory, because just depending on the area, I mean, just dealing with previous areas, for example, actually it was essentially just landed on them. It wasn't really anything at all to do with local council, or if they get a say in it. Now, you are going to be at this meeting this evening, aren't you? I'm hoping, anyway, we might be able to have a quick chat with you after that as well. I'm covering for Mark Stein, but are we expecting quite a high turnout to this meeting?
In fact, there was a decent turnout last week, and so the chair of the local parish council decided to put in another meeting to give more people time to have their say. So it is a scheduled parish meeting, and they will be talking about other things that are going on in the local area. But top of the agenda will be this migrant hotel. There'll be a public forum. There'll also be other representatives from the local authorities, West Northamptonshire County Council, also representatives from the local police as well, from Northamptonshire Police as well. So there'll be representatives from the authorities there, there'll be members of the public there, and they'll all get to say their meeting, and then those responses will be collated and then fed back to the Home Office, along with those other responses from Chris Eaton-Harris's website.
Lovely stuff. Thank you, Paul. Great. And I'll chat to you a little bit later on. Paul Hawkins there, just at the scene of that particular hotel. Understandably, lots of you have been getting in touch over this, and I think it's because a lot of you relate to it. Maybe this is happening in your area, but this is fascinating now, because a village of 500 people with a hotel, 400 asylum seekers are going to be plonked in it. There's nothing for them to do all day. There's nowhere for them to go apart from this hotel. Doesn't appear to be many shops around, nothing like that whatsoever. What is the point of all of this? Will it irreversibly change the area? That area may well have done better off having a hotel there. Of course, maybe more expensive for the hoteliers to run. Clearly, the reason why they've accepted the offer, I should say, from the Home Office here, is because it makes more financial sense for them to take that offer. It will be a lot of money. But what about, people who wanted to have weddings at that particular venue and all of this stuff? Anyway, Dan says, what a disgrace for the Home Office trying to house 400 illegal migrants in a village of 500 residents. More than anything else, this is what will get the Conservatives kicked out of power. Yeah, fine, but frankly, who else do you elect? Because actually, it's not going to get any better under Labour, some would say. Anyway, Anne says, what happened to all the Nightingale hospitals which were built during the pandemic? Couldn't they be altered to house immigrants? There must be an alternative to hotels. It would cost money to update empty buildings, but surely less than the daily cost. Well, you've got the daily cost also. I happen to know that whether or not it's the case for this specific hotel, it's certainly the case for a lot of the other hotels the Home Office has tried to requisition. They have offered a full refurb afterwards as well. So when you're seeing things like Holiday Inns and Britannia Hotels and all of this stuff, there's every chance the taxpayer is not just paying for the housing of these people indefinitely, and it will be indefinite, won't it? We all know that. And then the taxpayer is paying for those people if they do leave the hotel and go into the local area to the social housing stock, for their kids at school, for mental health, for the NHS, for whatever. The local taxpayer is paying for all of that. Well, then on top of that as well, you also have the cost of a refurb, which we will be paying for. So it's rather a lot of money. One more quick one. Iris says, this move really shows that the government are totally negligent and do not consider the feelings of the average common man and woman in the street. I believe a little bit later on we're going to be talking to Nigel Farage about this very issue, our very own Nigel Farage, who better to talk to about that. But yes, before all of that, Boris Johnson, he's been laying low on the backbenches. But tonight, he's giving a speech at the members-only Carlton Club. We'll be discussing whether this marks the return of Boris to the spotlight. Plus, yes, here he is, Nigel Farage will be here to give his response to that migrant hotel in a village of 500 residents, 400 asylum seekers about to be landed on there. I'll be back in just a moment.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back. Loads to rattle through between now and the end of the show, so let's get a move on. Boris Johnson is making a keynote speech this evening at the Carlton Club ahead of unveiling his portrait, obviously, as a former Prime Minister. Many are closely watching the former party leader with his die-hard supporters allegedly already plotting a return to him for number 10 this year. So can Boris make a comeback? With me now, from outside the Carlton Club, they wouldn't let him in. They wouldn't let him in for love nor money. It's Darren McCaffrey, GB News' political editor. Darren, I hope they do manage to let you in at some point, but what can we expect a little bit later on?
Yeah, banging down the doors to get in, Patrick. We're expecting Boris Johnson to turn up at some point in the next couple of hours or so. As you say, he's going to unveil that portrait to himself. It is a tradition that former Conservative Prime Ministers get to do at the Carlton Club. And then he's going to make a speech in front of his friends and colleagues, or at least old colleagues, if you like. I suspect it's going to be quite jovial. This is a place he's very familiar with. In fact, two of the events that may well have led to the end of his premiership happened in here in the last year or so. That is the Owen Paterson affair back in late 2001, and of course the Chris Pincher affair that ultimately was the straw that broke the camel's back and brought down his premiership. But in that speech, I think he's going to talk about his time as Prime Minister. He's also going to talk, if you like, about what he wants to do, maybe in the years to come, about the issues he cares about, whether that is Brexit or indeed whether it is, to a large degree, the war in Ukraine, which he's been campaigning on, suspected to go over to the United States to continue to pressurise US senators and congressmen and women there to keep up the support. I think in regards to this comeback idea that people have latched onto, not least of all his hardened supporters like Nadine Dorries, the former Culture Secretary, and Lord Cruddas, who was in the House of Lords, you know, they are starting this campaign because they feel, frankly, that the Conservative Party is not in a great position, that Rishi Sunak has not led Patrick to a bounce in the opinion polls. But in the end, is it likely to work? Well, they will argue it is necessary. They think the Conservative Party will go to a pretty bad defeat in the next election if they don't replace him. All I would suggest is that the party is very, very divided. I think it's pretty unlikely at the moment anything's going to change. I mean, another change of Conservative leader, I'm not entirely convinced. But as for Boris himself, he will love that we're talking about his future ambitions, potentially. And also, he's going to keep his, I think, cards close to his chest. So I don't think we're going to hear anything really significant tonight, but it is a reminder that Boris Johnson has not gone away.
No, he's certainly not gone away. Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey there, outside the Carlton Club, waiting for Boris Johnson. With me now is Michael Fabricant, Conservative MP for Lichfield. Michael, thank you very much for joining me. Now, you have been in the past, anyway, a very vocal supporter of Boris Johnson. Is there not a sense that he led you all down the garden path at the last time that there was some kind of leadership election, no, and you went out and backed him and then actually he rode back on it? Would you follow him up the hill again?
Well, I don't think the time is right, and I don't think that Boris thinks the time is right either. I mean, I do think it's a bit funny with the Ukrainian war going on and all the rest of it, that we're all obsessed with the fact that Boris is going to the Carlton Club, a place I wouldn't be seen dead in, by the way, merely to unveil a painting of himself.
Well, would you not go turn up? I mean, it's about time someone made a portrait of you, I think, and unveiled you somewhere at the Carlton Club. But no, look, do you think realistically Boris Johnson should be focusing more on keeping his own seat as opposed to whether or not he runs in the next general election or runs for Tory leader again, I should say?
Well, he's going to have a tough time in Uxbridge. I mean, it was always a very, very difficult seat. Very good friend of mine called John Randall was the MP for Uxbridge. And he had a great advertisement because he used to own a family department store called Randall's of Uxbridge. In fact, I didn't think you were going to ask me that question, but he gave me a present.
Oh,
there we are, a Randall's
let's go and have a look
Uxbridge.
back at Michael. Right.
A Randall's of Uxbridge truck. Anyway, but John Randall was saying it's very, very tough there. And yes, Boris will find it hard going, but I think he's allowed to go to the Carlton Club to unveil a picture.
Yes, of course he is. Now, rather disappointingly for, I would imagine, Conservative MPs, correct me if I'm wrong, there hasn't really been a Rishi Sunak bounce, has there? And is that a concern for you, looking at the next general election?
Well, undoubtedly, you know, that when Boris left, we were 10% down. And as John Curtis said a little earlier, on your channel, GB News, it went down now to 20%, maybe even a little bit more. But, you know, we're going in the middle of strikes when we're looking at all this. And you ask somebody a question, which is, you know, if there were a general election tomorrow, how would you vote? It's so hypothetical because everyone knows there isn't going to be a general election tomorrow. There's certainly no enthusiasm for Keir Starmer. Nobody knows what he stands for. When you look at also the question about, you know, who could handle the economy better, it's still the Conservatives, they feel, despite everything.
I do wonder, I just really do wonder whether or not some people on your benches look around now and think, I was so out of touch and so wrong to have wanted to biff Boris. But there we go. We'll have to wait and see. Michael, thank you very much.
I think they were completely mad to do that.
Yeah,
I think they were completely mad to do that. Because, you know, people respect him. He had a mandate because he had been selected by the membership of the party. And, you know,
people voted for him as well.
Yeah, exactly right. He was a very, very attractive guy to the electorate, despite all his faults, because he was a visionary.
Well, yeah, and some would argue, actually, maybe because of his flaws as well, but that's a conversation for another time. Michael, thank you very much. Michael Fabricant there, Conservative MP for Lichfield. Right, now, plans to house 400 migrants in a former hotel have been met with outrage by residents of a nearby village. Why? Well, because actually there's only 500 people in the village, so you're basically doubling the population of that village in Cretan now. And by the way, it was a 16th century manor house, the Highgate House. It's rather lovely. Some of the pictures of the rooms which we've been showing you are fantastic. I mean, it's nicer than where I live. Is it? Well, that is a low bar. Joining me now is GB News presenter Nigel Farage. Nigel, thank you very much. There you are. Good stuff. Well, we'll preview what you've got coming up on your show. But, I mean, this is just ridiculous. It's going to be an entire village now. The demographics of it changed irreversibly, one would imagine. And there's nothing for these people to do all day either, is there? Your views?
Well, you know, this is the first really high-profile, lovely rural location like this we've seen. The answer is very simple, Patrick. There are 140,000 people who've entered this country and are claiming asylum that haven't yet been processed. We have to house them somewhere, apparently. And they've run out of inner-city hotels to put them in. They've tried former army camps, but those conditions there simply aren't good enough. No, what was good enough for national servicemen or serving British soldiers, not good enough for the young men crossing the English Channel. And so here we are. And now it's arriving in the backyard of the Conservative Party. We have Sir Graham Brady, a hotel in Hale, in his constituency. Today it's Cretan with Chris Heaton-Harris. Last week it was David Davis's constituency. And given that the estimates are that somewhere between 50 and 100,000 people will cross the English Channel this year, unless the PM has the guts to act, One of these sites is coming to a hotel near you very soon.
So, Nigel, can I just ask you, just to play devil's advocate here, you know, if you're a villager somewhere in Cretan, right, why should I care? This is a hotel, it looks relatively rural, it looks like it's quite isolated. You know, all right, there's only 500 of us in the village, we probably know it quite well, it's all quaint and quiet. Oh, what could possibly go wrong with 400 asylum seekers being plonked onto my doorstep, Nigel?
I tell you what, if 400 young males from any background at all, turned up on your doorstep, I suggest you would be concerned, especially if it was somewhere without facilities. And, you know, what are people going to do all day long? Well, they're going to loiter. They're going to loiter, and people will begin to feel intimidated by it. Plus, it will change the whole nature of the village. But you know what? Every single time one of these sites is proposed, the local MP always says this area is wholly unsuitable. Well, get used to it, folks. All the while we have a Conservative government, this is our future. Not that I'm suggesting Labour would make any difference.
No, they wouldn't at all. Nigel, look, thank you very much. You're going to be on a little bit later on. Obviously, you're already in the studio. What have you got coming up? Quick preview for us?
Well, we're going to discuss clearly what's happening in Cretan, because there is a big public meeting beginning at 7 o'clock tonight, so we'll go live to Paul Hawkins, our reporter, who is there. We'll talk about Cottingham, where some halls of residence at Hull University now are not going to be sold to one of the companies housing asylum seekers. And I'll be joined by David Davis, veteran Conservative Member of Parliament. I'll ask him simply, if we believe in border controls, if we voted Brexit to take back control, why the hell should we vote for anyone like you ever again?
Look, thank you very much. It's definitely, as always, going to be one to watch tonight. That's Nigel Farage there. Right, look, I just wanted to go to a couple of your emails quickly, because this is an issue, and again, we are going to be sticking with this throughout the course of the evening here on GB News. So this is this hotel, disused hotel, not for much longer, of course, in Cretan. 400 asylum seekers are going to be plonked in there. Village has only got 500 people in it. For all the reasons Nigel outlined before, there's nothing for them to do all day. It's going to completely change the village. Any resident there, well within their rights to be a little bit miffed, I think it's fair to say. And he's right as well. Every single time it happens, the local MP goes, this area is wholly unsuitable. Yeah, fine, but this is happening right across the country now, isn't it? Bill says clearly the government have a magic money tree somewhere to pay all the millions for migrant hotels, but somehow they can't find the magic money tree for the NHS. Yeah, the NHS just being one of the elements. I mean, I do think maybe the NHS does already... Well, there is a magic money tree for the NHS, isn't it? It's just a question of where that money goes. But Martin says, it says it all when politicians can spin out new laws to stop their own citizens from striking, but they can't make laws to protect the UK. I know. But I'm not anti the anti-strike laws. I just think this is absolute madness. You can make the case for us to not do this now. Cost of living crisis, lack of space, demographic change, public safety, all of this stuff is dead easy to make the case against why we need to do this now, why we need to be changing little rural towns and villages irreversibly and spending millions of taxpayers' money to do it as well, and they just won't do it. Anyway, right, I'm going to go to Michelle Dewberry now with Jubes & Co. Up next is Michelle, and she's in the studio with me now. What have you got coming up, Michelle?
Hello, Patrick. Yeah, I want to look at these so-called anti-strike laws, wondering who supports them and who does not. And I'm also pondering tonight, is anyone actually really serious about sorting out the social care sector in this country? Everyone talks about it. We have all these different white papers, reports, commissions. Nothing really, though, substantial ever happens. Will it? And if so, who will be the man or woman for the job? And also, an interesting one, the age of criminality. What should it be? England and Wales, Northern Ireland, it's 10. Scotland, it's 12. But there are calls and public consultations for it to be increased. Should it be? And how much money do you need to earn to live comfortably? That's what I'm asking tonight.
Oh, what a show that is. Fantastic. I tell you what, there's quite a few absolutely stellar talking points in there. The age of criminality, yeah, 10, because the Bolger killers were the youngest people ever sentenced, I think, weren't they? Or,
yes, you are spot on.
Yeah, oh, there you go. It's almost like I occasionally read the news, isn't it? But there we go.
I know. You can come on my panel if you want. So
don't, Michelle. I would love to, actually. I would absolutely love to. Right, Michelle will be coming your way very, very shortly. Thank you very much. Michelle Dewberry with Jubes & Co. Make sure you tune in. Now, I am covering for Mark Stein as well, 8 till 9, and it's well worth a watch on that one because... we are going to be getting the reaction. So immediately after that parish council meeting where local residents are going to be discussing their opposition or otherwise to this hotel that's being plotted in our area, the Migrant Hotel, we are going to be at the scene for that and frankly mirroring and holding a mirror up to what is probably going to be happening, I hate to say it, but in a town or a village very, very near you. So it'd be well worth a watch. Let's get the immediate reaction there and see what happens. Thank you very much, everybody who's been tuning in. I'll see you a little bit later on. I'll hand you over now to Michelle Dewberry.
Hello. Mild, but fairly dull out there today. And for many places, it's damp. For some spots, the rain is quite heavy and could potentially cause some further disruption because it's been so wet this year. It is quite mild because we're kind of straddled by weather fronts and tucked in here some fairly mild air. But this weather front is swinging across the country tonight, and that will introduce cooler conditions for tomorrow, as well as further wet and windy weather as it moves through. We do have Met Office yellow warnings in place for that rain, but it should turn drier across Wales and South West England this evening. Many places drying up overnight, but the wind's strengthening in northern Scotland, so we have another Met Office yellow warning here, with the winds potentially causing some problems. It will be turning cooler through the night, but still most of us several degrees above freezing to start Wednesday. We'll start brighter than today as well, certainly across the Midlands and Eastern England. Generally a fine and bright sunny start to the day. Elsewhere there'll be some brighter spells, but a lot of showers, and you can see the showers just move in and
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.